Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Spring 2021 Board of Governors meeting. We will start in about 1 minute. There's still a number of folks logging in this morning to join us. So thanks again for your patience. Sarah, can you or Damon confirm that we have a quorum before I call us to order?
We do.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's 9:06 a.m. Welcome to, I believe, the 286th Board of Governors meeting, to our Spring 2021 meeting. I'm Dawn Jones, currently serving as your State Bar President. I hereby call this meeting to order. As I have with each of these meetings beginning last June, I want to open with a moment of silence. I don't always give details about the moment of silence. I think most of us understand why we're doing that. Today, I want to specifically talk about why we take this moment of silence before each of the Board of Governors meetings this year. Not only have we suffered collectively through this pandemic or these pandemics, but we've done so by having a social distance and being apart from each other. I ask us to take these moments of silence to think about all those we have lost, not only those members of our bar and our colleagues and friends, but our family members, not only those we've lost to COVID, but to natural illnesses, to accidents. Grieving this past year has been a challenge for so many of us for so many different reasons. And collectively, I want us to continue to take a moment of silence so that we can frankly grieve together and remember all those we've lost, including the lives lost this past week in the Atlanta spa shootings. So if you wouldn't mind, let's take a moment of silence. Thank you. As you all know, we had planned to meet in person in Brasstown for this spring meeting. This meeting is a joint meeting with the YLD, and Bert Hummel and I were excited about the opportunities we were going to have to work together in front of the bar during this meeting. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, as with all of our other Board of Governors meetings, we've had to change to a virtual format. However, it is my pleasure to have members of the Young Lawyers Division participate on our agenda today. That was purposeful. I should have given Bert the opportunity to pick the folks who participated, but instead I picked two of my favorites. One of the pleasures of being president. So without any further ado, I'm calling this meeting to order. I welcome, and also let me be clear, because we were going to be in Brasstown, which each of the meetings that we've had to have virtually, as you all may have noticed, I've also made sure that folks from the area where we would have been meeting in person were also able to participate. So I'm really grateful that Judge Joy Parks has agreed to provide our Pledge of Allegiance this morning.
Thank you, President Jones. My name is Joy Parks, and I am one of the Superior Court judges for the Anoda Judicial Circuit, and that is the circuit where Brasstown Valley is located. We cover Lumpkin County, White County, Towns County, and Union counties. It is a little chillier up here than it is down at the coast, as Ms. Aiken Ms. Akins pointed out this morning, but we are glad you're here with us virtually. So if you're able at this time, please stand and we will pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. We will next have our invocation by Wildy board member Pamela Peinado.
Good morning. My name is Pamela Peinado, and I am a partner at Lee and Peinado Immigration Law Group. I am with the YLD Board of Directors. Thank you for having me. Unity. That is what the State Bar is built upon. While we may have different beliefs and practices, the State Bar of Georgia remains united as one body, coming together to uphold the law, practice with compassion, and stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters of the bar and the community. Whether you follow any particular faith or none, I invite you to join me in prayer. Creator of the universe, we lift our hearts to you. We ask for wisdom and the strength to stand up for the laws of this state and for the citizens that we represent. We ask that you protect our leaders. Our leaders need you, God, from our fearless president, Don Jones, to the leaders in government, to me, to you, to every person listening to the sound of my voice. The leaders of the world have a mission to carry out, and we need protection. We also ask that you help us, God. Help us listen without judgment as others share their points of view. Help us work as a team in combining ideas for a greater society. Help us work as a whole rather than as individuals. Help us be sympathetic to those who need our services, because many of our citizens, they're looking to us to make sure that they are all treated equally regardless of their skin or their status. And let us never take that expectation lightly. During these stressful times, please be with our Asian American and Pacific Islander communities. Please be with our African American communities who seek justice. Please be with our immigrant communities who seek hope. Please watch over the marginalized citizens of all races, the poor, the elderly, our children, our healthcare workers, those who have lost a loved one to COVID-19, those who are currently suffering from COVID-19, the sick. More than ever, we need you. We need you and they need us. May we always have a spirit of camaraderie in this room and work together on our shared mission to sustain a sound bar, powerful and unified. And may the work that we do here today uplift, empower, and unite not only this body, but the nation. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pam. Now we will have the recognition of our special guest by Jared Parrish, a Young Lawyers Division member.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jared Parrish. I'm an assistant district attorney in the Coweta Judicial Circuit and a member of the YLD. On behalf of the State Bar, we would like to welcome and recognize the following special guests. From the Georgia Supreme Court, Chief Justice Harold Melton, Presiding Justice David Namias, Justice Sarah Warren, Justice Carla Wong McMillan, Justice Sean Ellen LaGrua. From the Court of Appeals of Georgia, Presiding Judge Ann Barnes, Presiding Judge Yvette Miller, Presiding Judge Sarah Doyle, Judge Trent Brown, Judge Ken Hodges, and Judge Verda Colvin. From the former bar presidents in attendance, we recognize Bob Kaufman, Linda Klein, Pat O'Connor, Patrice Perkins Hooker, John Salmon, Ken Hodges, and Daryl Sutton. Thank you very much for being here. I'll have a good day.
Great job. So just a bit of housekeeping now that we're heading into the business portion of our meeting. Please be reminded that if you have a question, we will continue to pull up those folks who have questions that they want to pose or concerns as we go through our discussion. It's great to use chat to continue to connect with everyone, and I ask that we do so respectfully because, as you all know, our meetings are public and there are likely members of the media watching this meeting right now. So keeping that in mind and understanding this is a professional meeting, let's be sure to pose any questions in our Q&A so that Damon, our executive director, or Sarah, our COO, can recognize you, help me recognize you, pull you up. It's great if your camera's on. If it's not on, that's fine. But we'll pull you up so that you can unmute and be able to pose your question. If you, that's it. So if there's a question, please don't post it in chat. For those of you, the other housekeeping thing is for those Board of Governors members who are calling into this meeting, you will be unable to respond to any of the polling questions that we will use to vote on particular action items. Please keep that in mind. Lastly, those who are able, as you know, we had during the mid-year meeting, we postponed a recognition of Jeff Davis, our former executive director. We will be handling that recognition later on in the agenda, and we will follow the closing of our meeting right after we adjourn, hopefully in a couple of hours. We will then have a virtual sending off for Jeff. So please, if you can, manage to give us a little bit of time after we adjourn to stay on and give Jeff your best wishes. I'm going to confirm that Sarah, he is in attendance today. I didn't do that before we started.
I'm sorry, he actually isn't able to be with us.
Okay.
He is on baby watch. So.
Okay, okay. So we won't be obviously holding the send off for him at the end of the meeting. We will, however, do that recognition, and we have a recorded message just for this instance because he's anticipating being a granddad. So and I can't be mad at him for missing this for that. With that said, Tony Del Campo, can you please provide our minutes?
Sure. Good morning, folks.
I'm sorry, roll call.
So wait a minute. Good morning, folks. And for the record, Justice Nelson Peterson is here, and also Judge McFadden is here. And I just wanted to clarify that. I got text from Justice Peterson letting me know that he was here. Everybody, welcome. We're doing these meetings remotely these days, so the roll call is a lot easier. You don't have to sign a paper. Your name just has to be noted in the record. If you're calling in and we only have a phone number, we may not know who that is. So just make sure to let us know, either sending me an email or Sarah Cool, and we will make sure to mark you as absent. Also, check your board books and make sure that you have been listed correctly. Because obviously, since we're doing this remotely, more people are missed. So we want to make sure that you are counted as present if you are here. And without further ado, that's it, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Del Campo. I will refer you all to the future meeting schedule on pages 13 and 14. We will have an opportunity to go into some detailed discussions about the upcoming annual meeting. These are different times, these are unique times. And today, as it stands, we are planning a hybrid meeting, essentially having people hopefully attend and participate in person from Thursday through Saturday night, Sunday morning in June. And also having an option for those folks who don't feel comfortable or won't feel comfortable attending in person to attend virtually, at least the business portions of our bar meetings of the conference of the annual meeting. So Damon, during his executive director's report, Damon Elmore is going to go into more detail, and he and I and Michelle Garner, our director of meetings, will be available to answer any questions you guys have. Please be prepared to participate in a survey during this meeting. Right after that discussion, we need to get a good gauge of what your interests are and whether or not today you think you'll be willing to attend, because we need to plan financially, budgetary wise, and logistically. So this information will be helpful, but we want to update you, give you more information, and then gauge your feedback and your current plans through a survey. As with the voting, those folks who are calling in will not be able to participate. Anyone who's interested in thinking about attending the annual meeting, whether you're a Board of Governors member or not, please feel free to participate in the survey. We'd like to get as much feedback as possible. And again, Damon will be handling that. Other than the future meeting schedule, other than the annual meeting discussion, if there are any other questions or concerns about the future meeting schedule, please follow up with Damon or I, and you can certainly put a question in the Q&A. The minutes of our last Board of Governors meeting mid-year on January 9th, 2021, Tony?
I apologize. All right, are there any changes or edits to the minutes as set forth that's on your book by anyone? Does anyone have any of those? All right, Madam President, not hearing any of that, I would accept the motion to accept the minutes.
Is there a motion to accept the minutes as presented?
I move to approve the minutes of the 285th meeting of the State Bar's Board of Governors as presented.
Second.
Thank you. And there's a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you for the motion and the second to approve the January 9th, 2021 Board of Governors minutes as presented. Any further discussion, please post it in the Q&A.
We have two with their hands raised. Do you want to promote those to get their chance?
Let me ask this question. Hands raised means, and because we can't see everyone on camera, you're going to have to raise your virtual hand if you have a question. You're going to have to raise your virtual hand if you have a question. If you still have if you have hands up, it means we're going to pull you up and we're going to ask you to provide any comments to the minutes. Still two hands up, Sarah?
We have Brandon Peak.
Okay. Have we pulled him up yet? I don't see Brandon.
I pulled him up and he has dropped off.
Okay, okay. I'm going to assume that there are no changes, and we left. This is the process that we have to deal with, and as always, I appreciate your patience. All those in favor? I'm sorry. We're going to pull up the poll now, and Sarah, let's give folks 45 seconds, and if you can count off 15 seconds at a time, give you 45 seconds to vote. So the Board of Governors, everyone should see, but the Board of Governors members are asked to vote. You should see a polling question now. Those who haven't called in, please click an answer and submit.
$15 seconds. $30. Okay.
Thank you. The minutes were approved unanimously.
Madam President, one abstention.
Thank you, Tony, with one abstention. Thank you. That's why this is a team effort, folks. Thank you, Secretary. Stop showing off for everybody, right? Okay, next we have on the agenda a proposed rule change. I'm going to ask our General Counsel, Paula Frederick, to be pulled up. And I believe we're also going to pull Sherry Boston and Gary Spencer on the screen for you all as well. I don't know if we're going to do it at once or after Paula speaks. I also want to recognize that there are members of Macon's U.S. Attorney's Office who are in attendance. And Paula, you're going to call those names as needed, correct?
That's right. We're
Okay.
here to answer questions if we have any.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm going to mute. Thank you, Paula.
Thank you. And good morning, everyone. The matter on the agenda for today is a proposed amendment to Rule 3.8, which is the rule that deals with special duties of a prosecutor. The version that appears in your board book at page 21 is the rule as recommended by the Disciplinary Rules and Procedures Committee. You have gotten an email from me earlier this week sending a letter from the combined U.S. Attorney's offices for the Northern, Middle, and Southern districts of Georgia, in which they are asking you all to consider some additional changes or some different proposals regarding the rule. They are here to answer questions, as I said, but I'd like to call on Gary Spencer, who is the Vice Chair of the Disciplinary Rules and Procedures Committee, and Sherry Boston as a representative of the District Attorneys Association to explain what the proposal is.
Good morning, folks. I am Gary Spencer. As Paula said, I'm Vice Chair of the Disciplinary Rules and Practice Committee. Several months ago, Sherry Boston brought this rule to our meeting, asking us to consider it. We took the rule into a subcommittee that was made up of representatives from GACTL, the Georgia Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, as well as the Prosecuting Attorneys Council, who had already approved it. We talked about it. Of course, there was some discussion back and forth, but we thought that the rule was a good rule and that it was certainly a great start, considering that at present, any violation by prosecutors, no matter how egregious, is basically a public reprimand. And the prosecutors recognized that that was not a good idea and that more teeth needed to be added. We brought it back to the full rules committee. The U.S. attorneys had representatives. They had concerns about the rule, about some of the interpretations and some of the implementations. Notwithstanding that, the rules committee looked at it, believed that the judges in our state were fully capable of interpreting this rule, as well as the State Bar of Georgia, and we passed the rule unanimously. And so we are here today asking that the Board of Governors adopt the rule in a commentary that has been proposed. Sherry?
Good morning, members of the Board of Governors. It's good to see you this morning. I am here not only as a member of the board, but also as the chairperson of the DA Oversight Committee that was put together as a part of last summer, the DA's Association, as well as the Solicitor General's Association, out of real concern about some of the very public actions of primarily some district attorneys. Internally, we felt that there was really a need to talk about making sure that the public knows, in particular, that there's accountability for our elected prosecutors. And so out of that concern, we formed a committee, and I was selected to chair that committee on behalf of all elected prosecutors across the state. We started digging into options in order to make sure that the process was clear and that there was room for accountability where it needed to be, and where we saw gaps and holes, in particular, where it was difficult for times for prosecutors to be held accountable for actions that we felt were concerning. As a result of examining many options, we really dug into the bar rules, and as a member of the disciplinary panel, which I've been a member of for I think 8 or 9 years now, I was also familiar with some of the areas of the rules that I thought could be beefed up. So as a result, we looked at 3.8, which is special rules of a prosecutor. This particular rule only applies to those acting in a capacity as a prosecuting attorney, whether that's in a full-time or a part-time position. And so after examining the rules and looking at the ABA model rules for 3.8, we felt that there were some areas that could be updated to bring justice and fairness to the rules in regards to the public and to those accused of crimes, as well as further holding prosecutors accountable, more specifically changing the rules to allow for the maximum penalty to be disbarment rather than just a public reprimand, and giving more guidance around, in particular, conviction and integrity rules, as well as communication rules. And so as a result, I brought this proposal to disciplinary rules, and Gary adequately outlined. There was a lot of conversation. And I, in fact, took it upon my initiative to contact the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Northern, Middle, and Southern to let them know that I was engaged in this process, in part because these rules do apply to our federal prosecutors as well, which is what brought them to the table for parts of these discussions at disciplinary rules. So that's the background. I would just urge our Board of Governors meetings to support this proposal and to do so with swiftness. We feel that it's very important that the public know very immediately that we are continuing to make sure that prosecutions across the state of Georgia are done with the most ethical obligations as possible. And this is a time where we need to ensure that people have faith in the criminal justice system. And as prosecutors, I speak for the DAs and the Solicitor Generals that we believe that this is a really important mission, and we ask you to support it.
Thank you. We have representatives from the U.S. Attorney's offices, I think in the Northern and Middle districts. We've got Stacy Ludwig, Kurt Erskine, Mickey Schreiber, and Sharice Alexander. They are available to answer questions if you have questions about their proposal. Otherwise, the matter that is on the agenda for a vote is the version of 3.8 that appears in the board book. And so it would be appropriate, if there are no questions, to entertain a motion regarding that proposal.
Thanks to you all for that informative summary. I don't see any Q&A, and Damon and Sarah, can you confirm that no one has raised their virtual hand or have posted questions in the Q&A? Again, as a reminder to folks, we're not monitoring chat for questions. So please raise your virtual hand or post in the Q&A if you have any questions before we take a vote. Damon, Sarah, do you see any questions?
No questions in the Q&A.
Gary has his hand raised.
Gary, who's on the... I'm thinking that's a mistake looking at his face.
I was trying to follow the rules. So you always say don't follow the rules.
Okay, yes, sir.
So if there are no questions, I move that we accept the printed version of Rule 3.8 as printed in the bar book.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
We do have a question from Paige Reese Whitaker.
Okay, let's go ahead and get the second on the record, and then we will pull up the judge to pose her question. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's moved and seconded that we accept the proposed Rule 3.8 change as presented. There's a question or a comment?
I'll promote her to panelist.
Thank you.
My question is why the Disciplinary Rules Committee decided against the proposed changes that were suggested by the U.S. Attorney's Office, because it sounds like those weren't counter to enacting a rule of this sort. They were just kind of some more specific things.
Paula, you or Gary or DA Austin would like to.
Gary, do you want to handle that?
I'm happy to answer. Paige, we felt like the changes proposed by the U.S. Attorney's offices would severely slow the implementation of the rule, but more importantly, that for example, the discussions around material and certain definitions, that we believe that the judges and the State Bar of Georgia could handle those. And so we felt like, while they had, their concerns were listened to, we felt like on the committee that the rule as printed was more than adequate to ensure accountability and in the conviction integrity process to make sure that to give that process some guidance. So that's why we went ahead with the rule. We did not go along with the suggestions outlined by the U.S. Attorney's Office.
I would just add that the proposal mirrors the American Bar Association model rule. And as we've said before, when we are moving towards rules that are the same as the ABA model, what that brings you is a body of case law and the experience of other jurisdictions to help with interpreting the rule.
So it sounded like from what the U.S. Attorney's Office had put in writing that hardly any states have actually adopted the model rule as it is offered. So I don't know whether there's a lot of case law about that or not, but I guess a couple of follow-ups. One is, how would adopting these changes slow our adoption of this rule? And secondly, did the District Attorneys Association get an opportunity to evaluate the suggested changes made by the U.S. attorneys and give any kind of position on that?
So 17 jurisdictions have adopted the ABA model. More than that, like Georgia, have adopted most of the ABA model. So there are pieces of it that haven't been adopted. It hasn't been adopted in its entirety by everybody, but there's certainly a lot of experience around the country with the language that we are talking about. Sherry, you wanted to add something?
In regards to Judge Reese Whitaker's question about whether the DAs had an opportunity to review the U.S. attorney changes, I just wanted to note that, yes, we did. In fact, prior to going to disciplinary rules, I had, I believe, approximately 4 meetings with representatives from the DOJ as well as the U.S. attorney's offices and their professional responsibility office. We discussed the details of their requested changes in detail. The DA's Association had some concerns about some of the changes. We felt that going with the ABA model rules was more appropriate. We then discussed all of this again in disciplinary rules as a group. So there were a large number of opportunities as we reviewed all of this. And I can tell you that the DAs and the SG's Association were more comfortable with the ABA model than the requested changes by the U.S. attorney's offices.
All right, thank you for that information.
Are there any other questions? If not, the current motion on the floor that's before us is approving the proposed changes to Rule 3.8, Special Responsibilities of a Prosecutor, as presented.
Dawn, we have another hand raised.
Okay, who is it, Damon?
Barry.
I'm sorry?
Identified as Barry. Let's see.
No last name. Okay.
Yeah. Barry, you are allowed to ask your question now. Are you muted?
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. I understand that there's some representatives there from the federal bench, the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Yes.
Can we hear from them why they think that the North Carolina rule is better than the proposed rule?
So for everyone's benefit, and Paul, I'm not sure if you mentioned this, about the documentations that were sent to the Board of Governors members from the U.S. Attorney's Office?
Yes. Yeah, that they've gotten an email from me with 2 letters from the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Okay. So Barry, your question is not based on the information you got. You have additional questions that you want to ask?
Since there's a representative there, can we hear from them why they think the North Carolina version is better than the proposed version?
I know there are a number of folks we can pull up. Paula, do you know? Or can one of those folks raise their hand? Say that again.
Sharice Alexander has been my contact person, and I would just ask her to come forward and let us know who wants to answer the question.
Okay.
I'm promoting her to panelist.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Alexander?
She hasn't joined yet.
Okay, so is this, Paula is,
Kurt Erskine
okay,
Okay.
was the author of the letter that came to the board.
okay.
Oh, he may not be, he was sort of iffy for whether he could attend the
Stacy
meeting.
Ludwig is the other person,
Yeah.
or Mickey Schreiber, Schieber. Are any of those folks?
They are. I've promoted Kurt and Stacy.
Cool, thank you. Kurt or Stacy, can you, I know it, I'm sorry, I'm ahead of the technology.
Yes, I am here.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Can you answer Barry's question as it relates to North Carolina, please?
Yes, I can. Well, let me first say thank you very much for allowing us to participate in this meeting. My name is Stacy Ludwig. I'm the director of the Department of Justice's Professional Responsibility Advisory Office. And just to give you some context, what my office does is we give all Department of Justice attorneys throughout the country advice on the professional responsibility rules. And initially, what I wanted to say here is that we are fully supportive of this rule. We wholeheartedly agree with what you are trying to do here. What our purpose is in essence to try to make the best rule possible. And our thought here is that the proposed rule is not as effective as it could be in accomplishing its purpose. So what we've tried to do here is ultimately propose a rule that we think is more clear, will be easier for everyone to understand. And our proposal brings in aspects of other rules throughout the country, other jurisdictions that have adopted Rule 3.8. There are only 5 jurisdictions that have adopted the ABA model rule. The 14 other jurisdictions that have adopted a rule like this one have changed the rule. So what we've done is we've looked at every one of those rules and we've evaluated them and tried to come up with the best rule. Sort of the idea being Georgia could perhaps be in the forefront and have the best rule here, one that's clear for everyone. And our ultimate concern was that there are a lot of undefined terms in the rule. And as everyone knows, if the term is undefined, it's unclear, then at the end of the day, it's difficult for those who are subject to the rules to understand and those who enforce the rules to be able to enforce an unclear standard. So, so with respect to the question about Rule 8.6, one of the rules we did look at was the rule in North Carolina. And what that rule does is, in essence, it imposes an obligation on all lawyers to disclose evidence of actual innocence, so that we felt that that rule would ultimately be the best rule because it best accomplishes the purpose here, to ensure that anyone who's actually innocent is not unfairly convicted or incarcerated. And therefore, all lawyers who came upon evidence that they thought was evidence of innocence, that they would, consistent with their duty of confidentiality, be obligated to disclose this evidence. So that's why, when, as I said, we evaluated all of the rules. And when we thought about the purpose of the rule, we really liked that rule. And we thought it was worthwhile to at least present that rule as an alternative. And the other alternative, as I said, we proposed was a rule that we thought clarified some of the terms in the rule. For example, we substituted material and credible, which are not defined, for the term substantial, which is actually defined in the rule. And if I could give you a concrete example of one of the ways in which we think that the rule is unclear, is by the use of the term material. Material appears in a number of places in the rules of professional conduct and is not defined. And material has a specific definition in the criminal law. In essence, meaning that if you come upon evidence, that if you had produced that evidence, it would have changed the outcome of the trial, that information is material. So we had a question with respect to, in that rule, does that mean that lawyers should look to the substantive standard in criminal law? Should they look at the standard in other rules of professional conduct? Or is there another definition that they should consider? And that's one of the examples of the lack of clarity that we had some concerns about. And that's why we proposed, for example, in that instance, is to use a term that was already defined in the rules, substantial, which is defined at the very beginning of the rules, so that everyone who looked at this rule, we'd all have the same understanding with respect to the meeting. The lawyers who had to follow this rule, the bar counsel who had to enforce the rule, and certainly the court who then ultimately had to interpret the rule. And that's one example. I certainly can discuss other examples, but again, we fully support the underlying goals of this rule. Our purpose really is let's make the best rule possible so that this rule is easy to understand and easy to enforce.
Thank you, Ms. Ludwig. Barry, does that answer your question?
Can you hear me again? I think I'm off mute.
We can hear you.
All right, yes, it does. And I apologize that my sign-in this morning doesn't include my last, excuse me, my last name. My name is Barry King. I'm from the Piedmont Circuit, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you. And thank you for giving us your whole name. We would have, had we been meeting in person, you would have been asked to approach the mic and identify yourself. So thank you for doing that.
We have 2 additional hands raised.
Okay, you want to call them up one at a time?
We'll call up William Monahan first.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Will Monahan, out of State Post 2. I applaud this rule and its purpose, and I understand fully and appreciate fully the importance of enacting this rule. Having spent 10 years with the Department of Justice, been in training with Stacey Ludwig and her group, I cannot overemphasize how much respect Stacey Ludwig personally and the Professional Responsibility Office at DOJ has, not just now, but over the entire career that I had at Justice since 2007. As a prosecutor, when you look at all the different pitfalls that can befall a prosecutor, there are a lot of important responsibilities that they handle. And it is absolutely essential when we're talking about professional responsibility and somebody who is serving his or her country in an incredibly dangerous role. And I can't tell you the number of my fellow AUSAs, myself included, who had to spend thousands and thousands on security for their homes and their families when people come after them. But in addition to that, having professional responsibility, having your bar license be jeopardized, I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to have a very clear understanding of what your responsibilities are and are not. And as the Professional Responsibility Office has pointed out, if the rule can be made clearer, even though I agree with Gary, the judges in Georgia, like Judge Whitaker and many others, I'm confident can handle those rules. What I'm also confident about is the prosecutors aren't going to know how they're going to be handled until after the fact. And that's not a place that we want to place, I think, our prosecutors who only last week have a new person to prosecute for heinous crimes that took place in Georgia. We want to make sure that crimes like that are prosecuted, and they're prosecuted vigorously, with our prosecutors understanding exactly what their obligations are. And so if the rule can be made clearer, I fully support the rule, but I also fully support justices and PRO's position that we do our best to truly set forth the best model rule and the best version of that model rule. Thank you.
Thank you. And Paula, I'm going to ask before we pull up, I think Seth Kirschenbaum has a question or a comment. Paula, can you remind us briefly of the process for rules, including rule changes, including the opportunity for folks to provide comments and the period of time?
Sure. After this board approves a proposed rule change, we publish it on the bar's website for at least 30 days. Usually it's more like 60 days. And during that time, any member of the bar who wants to comment on the proposal can do that. After that, we file a motion with the Supreme Court asking the court to amend the rule. And once again, any member who wants to comment on the rule, either suggesting, perceived improvements or opposing the rule, whatever they want to do, can do that, as well as ask the court for oral argument on the question of whether the rule change should be adopted. So there are two more levels at which anyone who has comments or objections or support for proposed rule change can be heard.
Thank you. Seth, can we pull up Seth Kirschenbaum, please?
Yes, just a moment.
Hello.
Yes, Seth. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. So I'm Seth Kirschenbaum, and I am a member of the Disciplinary Rules Committee with Gary. I'm also a former federal prosecutor. I worked with the Antitrust Division and the U.S. Attorney's Office in Atlanta, and I have great respect for that role. But first, I want to commend Sherry for her leadership on this issue. Prosecutorial misconduct has been a huge problem in America for a long time, and it has not been effectively dealt with. And this rule change originated with the prosecutors, led by Sherry Boston, who recognized that the time has come for this rule. And Sherry and her group and Gary and all the others that weighed in a timely fashion have crafted a very good rule. And this last minute attempt to water it down and change it in significant ways should be rejected. And I'll give you two examples. One proposal that they make that was touched on by Ms. Ludwig was to not make it a prosecutor's rule, but to make it a rule that applies to all lawyers. But that is a false equivalence. Private lawyers don't have the power, the access to information to put them in a equal position with prosecutors when it comes to redressing these kinds of issues. So to water the rule down by saying it's not a prosecutor's rule, it's a rule that applies to all lawyers, that is not a good idea and should be rejected. Another thing they've tried to do is to abdicate their responsibility to investigate, saying that, well, we don't have investigators in our offices, so we shouldn't be required to investigate. And that's a dodge. But the beginning of any investigation into a wrongful conviction starts with the prosecutor's own file. And they should have a duty to investigate their own files. And they run investigations with FBI, DEA, all kinds of investigations where they have investigators at their disposal. And if they need to investigate something, they can investigate. And finally, state prosecutors like Sherry have investigators in their offices and the capability of doing these investigations if they're necessary. So, I understand some of the technical points that were made by the Justice Department regarding the language, words, but my position is this is a great initiative. I'm so proud of Sherry for leading the charge on this as together with the prosecuting attorneys of Georgia. And I strongly urge my fellow members to approve this new rule. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. I think
We
I
may have
see.
lost Sherry. Did we lose Sherry?
I got kicked off for a moment, but I'm back.
Oh,
I'm here.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so I see Stacy Ludwig's hand is up. I don't want to get ahead of myself. Are there any other questions, folks with questions, or is that the next person we're pulling up?
Stacy raised her hand first. I think she has a comment, and then Scott Delius has his hand raised.
Okay, and again, as a reminder, I want to refer folks to the written materials that we have, because I think that provides a lot of information relevant to this discussion to help us efficiently move through this discussion. Thank you. Ms. Ludwig?
Muted.
Yeah, you have to, I think you have to unmute yourself.
I apologize. I think I had unmuted and then muted myself again. So I apologize.
Okay.
I apologize for
That's
for
okay.
that. What I wanted to just emphasize again is this is absolutely not a situation where we are trying to shirk our responsibilities. What we're trying to do here, honestly, is to be helpful. What I do and what my colleagues do every day is we give advice to Department of Justice lawyers, including prosecutors, on the rules of professional conduct throughout the country. And we have seen firsthand what vagueness in the rules do. So as I said, our goal here is to make the rule better, to change some of the terms so that the terms in the rule, that those rules, they're clear. And in fact, sort of changing from the model rule is not something unusual for the state of Georgia. This very rule, Rule 3.8, there are other parts of the rule, several parts that are different from the model rules. And one of the sections, 3.8C, Georgia rejected entirely. So moving from the model rule standard to a different standard is typical of something that Georgia has done. And this is not an area where there's a lot of jurisprudence, because most jurisdictions have not followed the ABA rule. So I just really want to emphasize that our role here, sort of dealing with this every day, dealing with these rules in every single jurisdiction, evaluating every rule throughout the country, and thinking about how can we work together here to come up with the best rule. Because the ABA rule, obviously, which was enacted in 2009, most jurisdictions haven't gone in that direction. The majority of jurisdictions haven't even adopted the rule. Only 5 have adopted the ABA rule. So in my mind, that suggests that maybe the ABA rule is problematic. Maybe Bar Council have had issues with respect to how do I enforce this rule? So sort of looking back at that and thinking about, well, perhaps because there has been a problem with this rule, why don't we look very closely at this rule and see if we can address perhaps some of the vagueness concerns, look at some of the things other the jurisdictions did to address those issues. And I'll say that a number of our proposals are based on other jurisdictions' rules. We took their language. So it's not only what we thought, but sort of the collective wisdom from throughout the country of what are all the issues here and how can we come up with the best rule. So that's what we're trying to do. We're willing to even, to talk with you more, to sort of work collectively to come up with a rule that we think everyone thinks is the best rule, so that prosecutors know what their obligations are, and this rule can be enforced. So our role is not to be obstreperous. Our rule is truly to be helpful, to be useful. As I said, we're more than willing to sit down with anyone, talk about some of these issues, and perhaps get a rule, hopefully would be the best rule in the country, because we've taken the experience of all the other jurisdictions and come up with something that works on all fronts.
Thank you, Ms. Ludwig. Is there another? I see that Ms. Alexander's hand is up. I'm assuming to add to the commentary. Before we pull her up, I wanted to say something, but I wanted to make sure that we have no one waiting with another question.
We do. Scott Delius is waiting.
Okay, that's right. Thank you. Scott, can you pull him up?
He's coming up.
Hey everybody, I'm Scott Delius representing the Atlanta Circuit. I just had more of a procedural question for Paula. Is this an all or nothing as it stands right now? In other words, we're voting on it as proposed, or is this, because I'm unclear basically on what the federal prosecutors are asking us to do. I mean, can we make changes now midstream, or are we voting on it only as it's written and changes could be made later, or does it need to be defeated now and go back to the drawing board to incorporate the changes that the federal prosecutors are asking for?
Right. Gary has said in the chat, the motion right now is for approval of the version that's in the board book as recommended by the Disciplinary Rules Committee. There's never an end, frankly, to possibilities for rule changes. So if you, obviously the board could propose an amendment to the motion now if it wanted to do that. I don't really like it when we do that with rules of professional conduct, because you really need to be maybe more thoughtful than making changes on the fly and presenting something. So I would think that if the board does not want to adopt the version that's in the board book right now, the appropriate course of action would be to send it back to the Rules Committee with direction for them to continue to work on a version that everyone could agree on. I will tell you, and maybe Sherry wants to speak to this, that this is on the agenda for action today at the request of the District Attorneys Association. They believe that it is important for you to act on it now. And so, yeah, there's no urgency other than that. So it's entirely up to you. But Sherry, do you want to speak to the timing?
And before Sherry, Madam DA, I want to respect your title, although I know you. So my quick comment is, for those who don't know, I do not sit on a disciplinary rules committee, but as I understand it, the folks who are the positions and discussions that we're having today were delved into. I understand that members of the U.S. Attorney's Office had an incredible amount of time, is how I'm going to phrase it, presenting and discussing with the disciplinary rules folks and Sherry's group specifically, and hammering out some of these points. And I don't want that to be lost, because we weren't in that process as a board of governors, but I was told by multiple persons who were in those rooms about how much time was taken to have these discussions. So I appreciate Ms. Ludwig's offering to sit down with folks. I also want to make sure you all know that these discussions have been held, and in fact, we extended. We were going to hopefully address this at the January mid-year meeting, and I'm hopefully not stepping on your toes, Sherry, but we were planning to address it, but because the U.S. Attorney's Office folks, and I'm not trying to blanket folks, because clearly this is not my lane, but they wanted the opportunity. They wanted more time to weigh in. So I want all of us in having a transparent discussion to be clear that these discussions have been going on behind the scenes for more than several months. Sherry?
Yes, thank you, President Jones. You laid it out very accurately, that I didn't want it to be lost on anyone, a member of the Board of Governors, that this was, this was not a last minute request at all by the U.S. Attorney's Office. And we have been in a great deal of discussion dating back to my first meetings on this, I believe in November, with the U.S. Attorney's Office. And if the members of the Board of Governors remember, this originally was slated to be on the January agenda. I asked that it be pulled because we were in the midst of trying to have additional conversations to see if we could come to some agreements, our associations with theirs, as well as discussing this with disciplinary rules. And we've had meetings with disciplinary rules. We've gone over this line by line, item by item. And what I will state in my place as a representative of the statewide prosecutors is that we could not come to a consensus. And therefore, the state prosecutors asked me to push forward with the version of 3.8 that was adopted, the model rule, ABA model rule. I think to Paula's point, we can all agree that this is just the starting point of this process. There is room for comment, and ultimately all of this will be decided by the Georgia Supreme Court, who is the final arbiter on the decisions around rules of professional conduct. So I, in earnest, I'm going to say I don't believe any additional conversations within disciplinary rules is going to change the feelings of the members of disciplinary rules or the members of the statewide prosecutors association. So once again, as a member of this body, as someone who has worked on several of these committees, I would encourage and request. I think it's important for us to move forward. I think, and what Ms. Ludwig is proposing around 8.6 is a completely different conversation than what I'm trying to have right now with 3.8. And so I would ask for support in regards to 3.8.
Dawn, you're muted.
Thank you, Madam DA. I want to go back to Scott to make sure that we've answered his question has been answered. And I see that I have Ms. Alexander's hands up and Ms. Ludwig's, but I want to ask Scott if his question has been answered.
I think so. It sounds like it's an all or nothing as written today.
It is. And if you do not like the proposal, then you vote it down.
Thank you very much.
Don, you have someone in the chat who has moved to call a question or wants to call a question, Susan Cox.
Okay, so Bill Neesmith.
That's a motion that needs a second.
So can you explain? Okay.
And it is not debatable. It's just voted up or down.
Right. So there's a motion to call the question, which essentially, if we vote yes, we stop the conversation at this point, and then we move directly to addressing the main motion that's currently before us about accepting this proposal. Correct, Bill?
That is correct.
Okay. So we don't have a poll ready for calling the question. Can we get one ready?
We're working on it.
Okay. All right. So Ms. Alexander, Ms. Ludwig, if you can bear with us, we're following Robert's rules. And we're creating a polling question so that the Board of Governors members can vote on whether to call the question, which again means it's been moved and seconded to call the question, which means ending this discussion, and which takes us back to the motion that's currently in front of us about accepting the proposed Rule 3.8. And Sarah, whenever that poll is ready to be put up.
And Madam President, this vote will take a 2/3 majority.
Thank you for that, Madam General Counsel.
Okay, Amber, that's poll 17.
Okay.
And if you and for those, if you vote for it, then I just explain what happens. If you vote against it, we will continue discussing, and I will then ask Ms. Alexander and then Ms. Ludwig to weigh in. So the poll about calling the question is up. And don't forget to hit submit. And if you can count off 45 seconds, Sarah, thank you.
Dawn, I know I seconded the motion to call the question. Nancy Whaley posed before that in the Q&A. What about the questions or folks waiting to talk before the motion was made to call the question?
So that's why I asked. What I just heard was there another question that was posed before the call the question? The challenge is the order, right? So in the Q&A that I can't see right now while I'm chairing, because I'm not that good of a multitasker, if those questions were posed before the call the question, then the call the question motion was out of order, in my opinion. Damon, can you respond? I see you nodding.
Yeah, so what I observed was there was a question by a member that asked about the process being fleshed out and some of those concerns. As I understood it, both Paula and Sherry addressed that question there. I could not tell if there was any other hand that was raised trying to match the chat with the other questions. So,
And to be clear, that's one of the reasons why we want people to post in the Q&A, because it's easier to track as far as timing, right?
Mhm.
So as chair, my understanding is we answered the questions. The call the question motion was not out of order. It was seconded, and it has passed by more than 2/3 vote that we just took. So we're going to move back to the main motion in front of us, which was moved and seconded to accept the proposed Rule 3.8 that's in front of us. It's called, the question's been called, there's no further discussion noted. Then, and I'm pausing because I see numbers in Q&A. Again, I'm not looking at chat. Please either raise your virtual hand or pose in Q&A. Are we good to post?
No, they're the same questions and we did answer them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we good to post the polling question, Sarah? We ready?
Yes.
Okay. And you guys have 45 seconds once it's up on the screen to vote and to, there you go.
$15. $30.
All right. By majority vote, the proposed rule change passed. And I do note that there were abstentions, but the rule change as proposed passed by majority vote. Thank you all. Thank you all very much, especially the U.S. Attorney Office folks who didn't have to be here. And I appreciate the time and effort that you provided to make sure that we were fully informed. I also thank Paula, Gary, Madam DA, and all the folks that you guys have been working with, because I know this has been a labor of, I'm not going to say love, but it's been an intensive process, and everybody's just trying to do the best they can for the bar. So I'm grateful and appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. And if anyone has questions about the process going forward, feel free to send me an email or give me a call. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Treasurer, Treasurer's report.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, everybody. You will find the financial information that has been prepared by our CFO on pages 25 through 37 of your board book. This information goes through the end of 2020. So it's current as of December 31st, 2020. If y'all look at page 28 of the board book, that kind of has the overview and the kind of easiest thing to look at to get a snapshot of kind of where we were at the end of 2020. And you'll see, if you look at that page 28, that we budgeted for the bar, we budgeted for a net loss of $336,000. And for the bar center, we budgeted a net gain of $550,600. So on the bar center gain, y'all will recall that we've talked about before that we've got 3 tenants moving out, Georgia Public Defenders and 2 other related entities moving out of the bar building, well, moved out of the bar building as of January 1. And that's going to leave us with a deficit that will not be attributed to the bar center of $556,000. So of course, that is a concern. We are looking for, or we've been looking for some tenants to replace those, but nothing has yet materialized. But rest assured that folks are working very hard to try to get that space released. Other results, nothing negative to report, I'm happy to say. Everybody is attempting to continue to mitigate the loss of the tenants, the revenue that the loss of the tenants and the loss of people using the parking has resulted in due to COVID. If you look at pages 34 and 35, another spot of good news, you will see that donations for the Legislative Fund and Georgia Legal Services Program were at an increase as of the end of last year. So thank everyone for their continued support of those two organizations. I guess that you will now have the treasurer's report. So thank y'all.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. And I do want to remind all Board of Governors members that via email, in addition to the letters from the U.S. Attorney's Office, you received an updated or revised dues notice that's different from the one in your board book. We caught one correction that we needed to make after the board book was printed. So please refer to the dues notice that you received via email. And let's go ahead and pull up our finance chair, Elena Kaplan.
Here.
Right there. Okay. So your treasurer, your oh, Sally's not going to stay. Okay. Sally's still here. But I'm going to turn it over to Elena after I kind of set up housekeeping. Our finance chair is going to report on the recommendations that are in front of you. The current plan that I hope you all will agree to by consensus is to vote on the recommendations of active and inactive dues in one poll, and then to vote on the others listed under 2A, B, and C of other bar due statement items, to vote on those as a slate together as a separate polling question. So think about that. Please post in Q&A if you have any concerns about doing so. Elena?
Thank you, President Jones. Good morning, everybody. It's nice to be here with you. It's been a moment. I wish I could see you in person right now, but this is what we have. This past year, I served as chair of the Finance Committee and have been working alongside Ron Turner and Damon Elmore to help shepherd through this process. And I wanted to give you some background on how we came to our recommendation to the Executive Committee, which they are now recommending to you regarding the bar dues amount. You'll see in your board book on pages 38 through 45, there are a variety of documents that are sort of underlying the recommendation. The first one on page 38 is the budget timetable, and this is the process by which both the budget that you'll vote on in June, as well as the bar dues recommendation is put together. In some sense, it's a backwards process because we have to send out the bar dues notices in the spring for people to pay their bar dues, and then we set up the budget from that. But you kind of have to know what the budget is in order to figure out what the bar dues amount is. So there's a lot of sort of multitasking, I guess, around that. There are a couple of other committees that meet before the Finance Committee meets and make recommendations about what happens with programs and what happens with personnel. So the recommendations of those committees are not revisited necessarily by the Finance Committee. We take the information that Programs Committee and Personnel Committee have decided, as well as the process that Ron Turner and Damon Elmore shepherd through the bar in looking at what the various departments need to spend to fulfill their mission in the following year, as well as projections of how many people are going to pass the bar and start paying dues, how many people are going to retire. So there's a whole bunch of different calculations that go into what the budget is. So Finance Committee met on February 9th. Ron had prepared a draft budget for us to look at in thinking about what what the bar dues amount needed to be. And you'll see in your packet, if you look on page 40 to 42, there are various, these are top line budgets, but these are based on all of that input about what's expected to happen in the following bar year. And they take into account the recommendations of those other committees. And what those are showing effectively is that we're probably going to have a net loss, but it's a really, really small net loss. It's $20,000 to $35,000. And as you may recall, we've had years where we've been projecting losses of several $100,000 or $1 million. And we were doing that purposefully because we had somehow accrued this humongous surplus, I think in large part because the Bar Center was throwing off a lot of money. And we were trying to burn that down. We did that for years. For years, we talked about burning down that surplus and then having a soft landing as far as not having some massive dues increase at the end of the whole thing. So, you know, over the years, we've had little bits of small dues increases. And it feels kind of like we're at a soft landing type of place because we're no longer projecting several $100,000 losses, and we're not in a position where we have to raise bar dues by some humongous amount. If you also note in the materials that Sally was referencing on page 32, there's a list of, you know, how much cash we have and how much of that is committed to something and how much of that is what we used to call surplus, but we're told we can't call it that anymore, but just basically extra cash that's not committed. So we have about $4 million, or we're projected to at the end of this bar year, $4 million of extra cash that's not committed to anything, as well as $4.75 million of reserves that are committed to, you know, our sort of rainy day fund in case something horrible happens, that there's almost $5 million worth of money. So that $20,000 to $35,000 of projected loss, that will reduce the $4 million extra free cash that we have. We have that money. So effectively, what was presented to us indicated that there wasn't a need to raise bar dues in order to, you know, offset some humongous projected net loss in the budget, the proposed budget, or to, you know, move towards a soft landing in the future. It feels like we're sort of there. And you may be wondering why that is. I mean, why that is because we've had these incremental bar dues increases over the years, but it's also because we've gotten a lot better at budgeting. For many, many years, we would come in at the end of the year at 92% of budget. So we were budgeting extra things that we weren't spending. We got rid of Cornerstones of Freedom as this like $600,000 item in our budget year to year. That was a few years ago. So that kind of improved it, but we were still coming in more like 95% of budget. And so the budget is a little bit tighter. But again, you know, even if we're off by a little bit, we still have $4 million worth of excess that if God forbid it's off by $100,000, we're not pulling on a line of credit or something. So the Finance Committee looked at all of that and came to the conclusion that it didn't make sense to recommend any kind of increase, that recommending that the dues stayed flat at $254 a year for actives and half of that for inactives was what made sense. And so the Finance Committee unanimously recommended that to the Executive Committee.
Thank you, Madam Finance Chair. Are there any questions before I request a motion? And if there aren't any questions pending, and I want to be sure that I'm taking it as a consensus of the Board of Governors that we're okay voting, as I mentioned prior to the report, that we're going to vote on the active and inactive dues first as a polling question, then we're going to vote on the other bar statement, and we're going to walk through those each of the two following motions. So seeing and hearing no questions, is there a motion as it relates to the active and inactive dues as presented?
I move to approve the recommendation of the Executive Committee for license fees in the amount of $254 for active members and $127 for inactive members.
Thank you.
Judge Baker has seconded that motion.
Thank you so much. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the recommendation of the Executive Committee for license fees in the amount of $254 for active members and $127 for inactive members. As a reminder, no change from last year's active and inactive dues. If there's no further discussion or questions or comments, do we see any?
No raised hands.
Good, thank you. Then let's go ahead and have the polling put up. Thank you.
$15. $30.
Madam President, while we're waiting, I thought maybe 45 seconds might be too much. It seems to me that maybe 30 might be, maybe Sarah can tell us if people are voting faster.
No, I'm comfortable with 45.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
Thank
right.
you. So that passed by majority vote for the dues. Thank you so much. Is there a motion as it relates to the approval of other bar due statement items that are listed on your agenda?
Move to approve the other bar due statement items as listed on the agenda. That is section dues, assessments required by bar rules or Supreme Court mandate, and other contributions as they are presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's moved and seconded to approve the other bar due statement items as listed on the agenda. Is there any further discussion or questions?
No raised hands.
Thank you. Then we're ready for the polling.
$15. $30.
And the approval of the other bar due statement items has been approved by majority vote with some abstentions. Thank you. Okay. Next, we have our Elections Committee recommendation by the Chair of the Elections Committee, Allegra Lawrence Hardy. Thank you, Elena. Thank you so much. And let me just say, as a reminder, Elena, you want to mention the next Finance Committee meeting, which is April. That wasn't a test. If you don't
April 12th, yes.
The Finance Committee, so that to be prepared to bring a budget budget for the next bar year up for a vote for the Board of Governors. So to give you guys a heads up. Thank you, Elena. Have a good one.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Good morning. Bye.
Madam Chair.
Good morning.
Good morning.
President, thank you so much for having the Elections Committee on the agenda today. I come to you all on behalf of the Elections Committee with a recommendation to move to opt in for paper ballots for the Board of Governors elections. And I know that I have slides. I don't know if, Sarah, if they're going to be able to be.
I'll pull those up right now. Give me just a moment.
Thank you so much. And so today I'm here to ask the board to consider having our elections process move to one where we have an opt-in for paper ballots, but that the default option for our members would be electronic ballots. This proposal would result in us saving approximately 50%, about $17,000 to $18,000 annually. I do want to note that in the first year, we would not realize that savings because we would recommend that some of that saved money would be used for a public relations campaign to make sure people understood how they might go about voting electronically and how they might ensure they wanted a paper ballot if that is what they wanted. But that our goal is to make sure that we are being good stewards of our members' money. And really, frankly, we have used this time during the pandemic to study the trends and to really acknowledge how much more is being done electronically now in this day, and to really look at leveraging that into a savings for the bar. Next slide, please. You'll see here a summary of the data that our committee reviewed. And as you can see, there's an overwhelming trend towards electronic submission of ballots. And so currently, as you all know, what happens is that you would normally, the default would be that you would get a paper ballot and you would have to opt into the electronic ballot. Again, our recommendation is not that there be any one way of doing it, that all of our members still continue to have these same two choices, but that the default option be the electronic ballot. Next slide, please. As I mentioned at the very beginning, we think it's important to have a publicity strategy to make sure people know that this is changing. We don't want anyone to feel tricked or to have lack of information about the method in which they may vote. As you all know, we don't have huge participation from our bar already in the elections process. And so we want to make sure that people have really good information about this change. And we, in fact, actually think it can be an opportunity to encourage more members to participate generally, letting them know how easy it will now be if they can participate with an electronic ballot without having to take any additional steps. So that is our recommendation. Madam President, we are open for a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there a motion as it relates to the elections recommendation?
Don, Judge Baker moved to accept the recommendation of the election committee.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the elections committee recommendation as presented. Any questions or discussion?
No raised hands.
And no Q&A? Okay, then we're ready for the polling question.
$15. $30.
That the motion, the recommendation of the elections committee was passed by majority vote with an abstention. I don't know the number, but an abstention noted, but it passed by majority vote. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank your committee for the work it's done. Even in a bar year where we know we've saved some money as it relates to not having in-person meetings, events, etc. We appreciate that everyone is cognizant of opportunities to belt tighten and to save money for our bar members in ways that make sense. So thank you so much for your leadership.
Thank you.
Okay. And Tony, did you want to remind folks about the roll, or we're good before I give my report?
I think we're fine. I'll probably do it a little bit later.
Okay, good. Cut me off if you need to. So I'll
All
forget.
good, all good.
Okay. I think I'm hearing some feedback. So if everybody could mute just to make sure everyone can hear me. Sarah has taught me pretty good about Zoom this year. So I'm compared to last June, I'm looking and sounding way better via this virtual meeting than I was last June. Thank you for muting everyone. Real quick, I'm not going to take up much time. We're busy. As your president, it continues to be my honor and privilege to serve. A couple of things I want to highlight. As you know, because of timing, I didn't give you an update from our January meeting. It would be similar to this one with a few changes. I continue to be asked and am grateful for the speaking opportunities on behalf of the State Bar that I've had, including most recently the ABA Tech Show, where I was on a panel with National Bar Association President and good girlfriend, C.K. Hoffler, to talk about social justice issues and how bars can address those issues, and giving some food for thought about ways in which individuals, bar members, local bar associations, and state bar associations can address some of these issues that we've all been dealing with this year. As related to that, you all have in the back of your board book on page 89, the Unparalleled Unity CLE that the Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism provided yesterday. It was my absolute pleasure to participate and officially chair that CLE and to talk to the more than 1,500 participants who stayed, believe it or not, through the 2 hours to attend, to ask questions. Unparalleled Unity was a theme that we took from a speech or an article, it was a speech, an article provided by our Chief Justice, Justice Melton, last year. And Carlise and Kevin Wilson and others worked really hard to put that together. There were a couple of takeaways that you will hear me talk about, and one of them I'll summarize at the end of my brief report. But I wanted to say, for those who missed it, through midnight last night, I was texting and conversing with folks who had attended and were extremely excited and grateful for the honest and genuine conversation, basically, that happened during the course of those 2 hours yesterday with all of the panelists involved. So if you missed it, follow up with Carlise to figure out how to address it. I also participated in a Southern Conference of Bar Presidents conference earlier this year. I continue to comment on how grateful I am and how helpful having these connections with other bar presidents throughout the country has been for me. Daryl gave me a heads up when I was entering the president-elect position about how useful these resources are, and he wasn't joking. I have had specific conversations with members of the Southern Conference of Bar Presidents, and I'm talking about the National Conference of Bar Presidents that I attended. The Southern Conference of Bar Presidents members and I have been in regular conversation, especially those who are trying, like us, to have a hybrid meeting, or like Louisiana Bar, who appears to be trying to have a full-on in-person meeting for several hundred folks during the annual meeting, the same time we're having our annual meeting in June. I also want to mention that during the National Conference of Bar Presidents plenary session, the State Bar of Georgia was specifically recognized for 2 efforts. Specifically recognized in the plenary session and applauded for our use our 6 offerings to all of our bar members, and for the lawyer wellness program overall. Those 2 program opportunities that we provide to our members was specifically highlighted and called out during the opening remarks in our plenary session for the National Conference of Bar Presidents. Related to our lawyer wellness, you will also see on towards the back of your board book on page 91, The Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism is also providing a suicide awareness program on Friday, April 30th. I want to make sure that we're passing this information on to our circuit members. Although it's not necessarily discussed throughout our bar how much and the different ways people are struggling, but we know people are struggling. And I know for a fact that our Lawyer Assistance Program, our wellness programs, and programs like the Suicide Awareness Program offered by the Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism is necessary to save lives, to better our lives, and to make us healthier and happier as we move through the challenges related to these pandemics. As an aside, I've been commented on how I've been huddling at least once a week with senior staff on a scheduled basis. The last couple of weeks, we've switched to 2 times a week. And I tell you that because it's just another way for me to describe to you the numerous moving parts to this particular bar year as it relates to new and unique challenges that we haven't faced before, largely due to the pandemic, but also due to public forums and the ways people now express themselves, and to some extent crowdsourcing. So some of the twice a week huddles that I have with Paula, with Damon, with Sarah, and we pull in other staff as necessary and other EC members as necessary. We talk about safety and security concerns for each of our bar offices. As a reminder, we have offices in Tifton and in Savannah, as well as the bar headquarters, our building on 104 Marietta. We also talk about ways to continue to connect and support our committees, our sections, to make sure that everyone is fully functioning remotely. And lastly, and I'm sure Damon's going to talk about this more, COVID-19 protocols, or at least touch on it, that they have gone back and looked at and reviewed COVID-19 protocols, revising them as necessary as we move, hopefully, gladly into we're trying to get together to meet again schedule. We have to be cognizant. We will continue to be cognizant about doing our best to ensure to maintain the lowest risk of exposure to our staff, to the lawyers and your clients who come into our bar building, which is currently not open, but hopefully that's coming. And looking forward to us meeting together in person to handle the business of the bar. The last thing I'll comment on is that as we continue to fully function remotely and to support the bar, my goal remains the same today as it was when I was installed last June. And that is that you don't have to wonder what's going on at the bar. You don't have to wonder what's happening to your bar dues. You don't have to wonder if the business of the bar is continuing, because you see it, you hear it. I welcome you to continue to use and access the website at www.gabar.org to look at the calendar of events, to pull up past minutes of our executive committee, which is met on more than a monthly basis at this point. And I'll give you a final report on all of that in June. But we have been working really hard. I'm proud of the work we've done to date collectively. And I appreciate your continued leadership as members of the Board of Governors. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. And I'll leave you with one of the tidbits I took away from yesterday's discussion thanks to Georgia State University College of Law professor Tanya Washington. She talked about us all having the space and the grace, the space to give each other room as we're having discussions about race, as we're trying to move together through this pandemic to support and to help each other, and to do more than tolerate each other, but to love and support each other. You have to give each other space to do that. And sometimes that includes space to make mistakes, which also goes to the grace part of it, is to allow ourselves and each other a learning curve, an opportunity to have awkward conversations that need to be had, an opportunity to be uncomfortable without being defensive, without labeling someone, but allowing them at the same time to share their perspective. So if you hear nothing else from my president's report, please help me continue with our bar, with our bench, and frankly, with our communities in the state of Georgia to continue with space and grace. With that, I'll turn it over to our executive director.
Thank you, Dawn. Allow me a chance to say hello to the Chief Justice and all members of the Supreme Court that's here with us today. Let me also say hello to our past presidents and thank many of them for their kind words and advice over these past 76 days or so. I'll be brief in my remarks, highlighting some critical issues related to our bar operations. As I mentioned to many of you in advance of the meeting, this report and future reports will focus on strategic direction of the operations, the ways that we are working to provide member value, important things to know about 104 Marietta Street and our Savannah and Tifton offices, insight into matters that are important to our staff and employee morale, our priority matters, and then maybe a personal privilege in providing kudos for various colleagues and staff members. As a final point today, and if it hasn't been made clear, I'll also give you an update on our annual meeting planning and processes. I can answer questions you might have today, but I'm always available at my email, which I'm going to shorten. It's just damone@gabar.org. So in talking about strategic direction, we recently started an internal discussion related to strategic direction for the operations. We're early in the process, but excited about the feedback from many of our department heads and the discussion related to efficiencies and obsolete processes we believe that may exist. On top of that, Natalie Kelly is helping us to assemble a team that will have a specific review of strategic direction for the operations. And that kind of review focuses on matters of technology, emerging trends, enhancing member value, etc. So stay tuned for additional discussion that'll be coming about that. As it relates to member value, this is an analysis that we're doing in everything that we're working on. Our recent time and work has reminded us that we maybe do a refresher or a reintroduction of programs and how they work and provide value. And that's in part with a discussion with Elizabeth Fight as president-elect, and we're optimistic and hopeful about exploring that more. What's most important in our recent work for member value is that we are close to wrapping up our search for our director of communications. And the reason that we feel that that provides member value is just not as only because of the importance of that department and what it does, but we think that the person that we've identified has some additional skills which will be integral into the way that we work going forward. From a staff perspective, we feel that employee morale is good. In spite of full remote work, we are serving our customers. Business is open. Communication is good. We are also adopting that spirit of transparency and opening the work. We are optimistic because we see a light at the end of the tunnel related to COVID and next steps for work as we plan a full reopen for staff around July 6th. Speaking of that reopen, when we talk about 104 Marietta Street, that's what the plan is for the opening to coincide with the beginning of the bar year, warmer weather, and wider spread of vaccinations. We've shared that planning with all of our tenants right now and have even kind of indicated that to all of you. We are walking very softly into easy openings with meetings or other functions that are going on, but those are designed mainly to make sure that our protocol is effective, that our safe planning makes sense. And our teams, especially in Savannah and Tifton, have been anxious and excited to help move that forward. Normally we provide in a report like this a comment on our finances, but of course, Sally did a fantastic job. Ron does a good job on the day-to-day to help present where we stand there. And I want to thank Elena and the Finance Committee for their work this year. Just be mindful, though, we continue to focus on expenses And we are fully aware of the space that we have available at 104 Marietta Street and the planning that we can do in order to utilize that most effectively. As far as priority matters go, there are a number of things that have kept our attention. You know, I didn't get a chance to completely update you all at our mid-year meeting, but since joining at the middle of the bar year or the beginning of the second half of the bar year brings a number of joys. We worked through our mid-year meeting, our budgeting process. As you saw, our programs, personnel, and finance committees met. We began a legislative session over these past 70 plus days. And all of that has seemed to level off just a little bit, but we are keeping a close eye on the legislative session and the good work that Christine and her team will do over there, and she'll have an update later. We are ensuring the safety of our staff while serving our members as part of this continuing COVID climate. One of our priority matters continues to be producing quality programming through our ICLE department, and we're working on that regularly. As I mentioned, securing tenants for 104 Marietta Street and protecting those assets there. And then, of course, the annual meeting. So let me talk about that a little bit. As you are aware, our plans for our annual meeting are underway. The meeting will be hybrid with many events in person at the Wild Dunes Resort in the Isle of Palms. So many factors make the planning for this meeting unique, with COVID being the most important factor. The new portion of the hotel is not ready for occupancy until March 26th, technically. But we've received a report back that it is up and it is beautiful. So we're excited about that. Consistent with those huddles with Don and Elizabeth being a part of those meetings as well, we've been going through each of the details of each of the scheduled events, assessing placement and timing and spacing, and hearing feedback from the chairs or the liaisons of the groups that will want to be a part of those meetings there. We are making every decision with a keen eye on value and fun, but with that additional eye on safety. Over the next 7 to 14 days, you'll start to see communication and information related to room registration, and it will be important to get that feedback and those responses back in ASAP. Soon thereafter, you'll see information related to registration information for the events and the meetings that will be a part of that. To assist us with that registration and the hybrid capacity of the meeting that we have going on, we've partnered with a platform called Bizzabo. And in fact, we've partnered with them for the next 4 meetings. And so they'll be the base of our events, particularly the feeds, but they'll give us some additional support on registration, highlighting the speakers at each of the events, providing additional information, details, directions. A lot of those things that if you're attending hybridly that you would normally go to the registration desk for information, they'll present it there, but there'll be a solid platform for giving all of the information to make this more global than it has been. We feel optimistic about the meeting and our planning, chiefly because we know how important it is to many and what it means from a symbolic standpoint. So we'll ask you about your plans here in a minute with the survey. But there's one more thing that we have to make abundantly clear, and that is the planning and safety protocols that we've put in there. Our safety plans and protocols will include face covering at all events. Our safety and care protocol will ensure appropriate spacing at all of the events and all the meetings. We literally have the run of all the hotel's meeting space, and we plan to use it wisely. Our safety and care protocols also include for event signage, clear communication before the event ahead of time, throughout, and reminders about our efforts to be sure that we have a substantive and safe but fun experience. Our safety and care protocol will rely largely on part of our attendance being vaccinated, providing one more layer of protection and peace of mind when it comes to small groups and gatherings. And we hope all of you interested in that vaccination go out and get it. That will make us feel more comfortable. But beyond all that, we just can't wait to see you all in June. And just bear with us because there will be a lot of communication that continues to come out there. So I hope it just doesn't tire you there. I'd be remiss if I didn't give some kudos to some of my staff members. Well, all of them, everybody working here day in and day out is working really hard to give our members what they need. I'm particularly grateful to Paula, to Ron, to Sandra, to Sarah for their work. Really, mostly, they've been very helpful through the transition. And even before that, when we started transitioning after your vote in October. And then extremely grateful for the support of the executive committee and the way that they've helped during this transition. So as always, thank you. Thank you for the messages and suggestions that you all have sent back. And if I haven't been clear before, thank you for allowing me to be in this position and in your vote of confidence in October. Let me know what questions you might have right now, or as I mentioned, damone@gabar.org. Thank you, Don.
Thanks, Damon. I wanted to make sure I was texting Elizabeth, but she's probably paying attention to the meeting like I should be. But I wanted to make sure that our president-elect had an opportunity to add any comments, especially if folks had specific questions or concerns you wanted to provide to the group as it relates to portions of the meeting before we take the survey.
Hey, thanks, Dawn. I don't think there's anything additional to add. You know, we're just all going to work together to try to come up with the best way to have the meeting in a way that's safe and then also honors what folks have come to expect from us. But I appreciate that opportunity.
I'd like to call for the polling questions that we mentioned about the annual meeting, please.
Sure. So let me make sure. I saw a chat, but I guess that wasn't us. Are there any, based on the information we provided, and one thing I want to say that's already come up in the executive committee meeting, a couple of things for you all to keep in mind that probably wouldn't have occurred to me if I wasn't on the executive committee and in this position. As we're planning this meeting, we're going to be asking folks who attend to wear masks to all State Bar of Georgia annual meeting events, indoors or outdoors. We're asking you to wear a mask during the course of our annual meeting. That's our expectation when you attend. The other thing we expect when you attend is that you will keep a social distance. Understanding we're not going to be, one, we're not going to be able to, and two, we're not going to be equipped to police everyone. I understand there are folks who are not as concerned for various reasons and don't feel like they need a social distance, but everybody should have the expectation that unless you've agreed to somebody else, that for especially when we're indoors, we're going to be seated 6 feet apart in the Board of Governors meetings and the other bar related or other organizational meetings in our committee and section meetings and our WildD meetings. We will be seated 6 feet apart, conducting business. And to the greatest extent possible, we will be making sure that people are not encouraged to gather close together, even outdoors. Again, especially understanding that everybody's going to have a different level of comfort in doing so. Already discussed in the EC meeting last week, what if I'm vaccinated? Can't people who are vaccinated come to the annual meeting, not have to worry about masks? Well, we're not in a position now, and I don't expect us to be in the near future, to police who's been vaccinated and who's able to go without a mask, go with a mask, social distance or not. That's really, we have enough challenges without having to worry about staff being required to police people wearing masks, socially distancing, et cetera. So understanding that's the requirement as you head into this survey, I wanted to lay out some of those comments because again, this is all new to everyone. It's a moving target. And this is the information we have today and what we're planning as of today. So with all that in mind, if there are no other questions, then please set up the polling questions, Mr. Elmore.
Don, our first question is simple, to just ask if people have plans today to attend the meeting, planned as it is, either in person or virtual, or undecided.
15. 30.
And we're not going to publish the results, Sarah. So let's just go ahead and move to the next survey. So let me, do you see that question, Damon, from Scott? Yeah, I honestly can't drill down further than that. I understand that when we eat, people are going to have to take their masks off. So we're just asking for you all to be cognizant of that. I have no responses to around the pool. I don't think you can swim with a mask. One of the things we're also doing, the Louisiana Bar Association, again, through relationships with the Southern Conference, Sarah's already reached out to them specifically to see what they're doing. They're meeting in Sandestin, the same time frame that we're meeting in Wild Dunes Resort. So not to get into the weeds, Scott, because I really can't, but I think we're going to have to, I hate to say exceptions. I really hate to say that word out loud, but I understand there are going to be instances like when you're eating and drinking where people are not going to be able to keep their masks on. I also understand with some outdoor activities that it makes the concerns about infection spreading and us being a super spreader event decrease. So to the extent possible, we're trying to have as many outdoor events, including the receptions on Friday night, as many as possible. So this is exactly why we're having this discussion, and some of this we're going to take back and figure out, but I really can't get into more details about rules of mask wearing beyond what I've already said, basically because all of those intricate details we haven't worked out, but it's not going to be unreasonable. So
ready for the second question?
Yes.
Okay.
And Damon, please jump in because that popped up, but I'm not monitoring the chat. So, and Q&A, if there are any other questions that we need to answer, please, let's do that.
Yeah, Don, a question has come up. It's come up in the form of an objection to us not publishing the responses.
Oh, I don't have a problem with that. I was trying to save some time. If
Yeah,
you guys,
I will say we could go back and publish, but the response to the first poll indicated that there was 61% of people said that they would attend in person. Approximately 17, if I remember the correct, said virtually, and that left 20 or whatever the math is for undecided. And we are aware that that undecided part really depends on what things look like over through April and May. And we appreciate that and have taken that into consideration where we've eliminated any late fee registration this year as a result of that. This question, though, is asking if attending in person, do you plan to stay on the property at Wild Dunes? And for the people that are attending in person, 85% have said yes. One person said no, and 14%, about 11 people are undecided about whether they would stay at that property.
thank you. And for as a reminder, everyone who's thinking about attending the annual meeting, please respond to the survey. You are welcome. We encourage you. We want as much feedback as possible. Wasn't trying to hide the ball, was just trying to save some time. So yeah, thank you for publishing each of the responses.
Okay, ready?
Yep,
yeah, I missed the last question, but that's I think I'm going to be there.
Yeah, so this one is mainly for planning. This is asking if attending in person, do your plans currently include bringing family and our guests? We have had a high level of interest, and so we want to be mindful of what our space is. We want to be mindful of what our pod will be. And then we also want to be aware of what additional events we might need to consider. Some of those activities may or may not evolve as heavily as we'd seen in the past, but we do want to make sure that we have some options. And we're at 40 seconds.
And we're building in some, to Elizabeth's point, you don't want to register and come to a bunch of boring meetings, even though it's on the beach and at a beautiful venue. You want to have some fun. We hope to have some fun.
Yeah, Don, 71% of people said they are planning on bringing family or guests. 17%, about 16 folks said they are not planning on bringing them. They just want to go to the beach by themselves. And then about 13% are undecided in their responses.
So my benefit, Sarah, do all attendees see the polls results or no?
Yes, they do now. They didn't see
Yeah,
the first one, but they've seen the last.
Okay, good. So Damon, just so you won't have to narrate for when we're publishing the polls now.
Yep, that's our last one.
Okay.
We have one more about safety measures. Would you like to run that one?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Sarah is going to tell me I should have looked at my email this morning.
So again, not going into details, right, Damon? But we want to make sure that your expectation is that you will need to be wearing a mask at the annual meeting and socially distancing. And again, we'll be getting into the weeds really soon.
$30 seconds. I'm just going to stop commenting.
And thanks for the heads up. Somebody said the Florida Bar is meeting in Orlando. Sarah, can you add that to your list?
I will.
And I'd love, Philip, Augustine, the feedback from your Florida Bar workers' comp meeting in April, please. Okay, everybody see that, the results? Love that answer. It's not going to be fun, especially with an open bar, to try to manage folks being compliant. Is that the last one, Sarah?
That is the last one.
Does I'm sorry. Damn it. So I want to make sure, and those are good questions. We had the Atlanta delegates meeting and somebody said, hey, if I want as much time as possible to decide whether or not I'm going to attend. And that's when we ended up waiving the late fee because somebody asked. So this is the time to ask questions. I love Eric Ballinger's. I'm going to stop the chat pop-ups because I'm easily distracted. But this is the time to ask questions. It's an ongoing weekly conversation with me, Elizabeth, the senior staff, the hotel, the venue. And there are going to be things we haven't thought about. And as we go along and we start the registration process, soon you will be getting information to reserve rooms. The process will move quickly. So please be sure to look out for emails from Michelle Garner and the Georgia Bar as it relates to setting up and reserving rooms. We've been getting those requests for the last several weeks about when the room blocks are going to be open. And then we'll be soon thereafter, we will be registering people as Michelle's working in the next week or two to firm up our general events, as well as the specific meetings. Is there anything else, Damon, you want to add?
Yeah. And so specific thanks to Nancy Whaley, who raised that issue about the late registration. It was a good idea. You know, our results here were consistent with a poll that the Young Lawyers Division also recently took related to its members and their plans on attending the meeting. They had a lot more people who at the time were undecided. I don't know if Bert wanted to indicate anything else about what they discovered.
Yeah, because that's a large swath of attendees. So Bert, you have anything you want to add?
I was, as Damon indicated, there was actually a large percentage of folks that were undecided. And so as a forward-thinking leader, I had a poll ready to determine why. And surprisingly, it wasn't actually COVID concerns that was the largest. It was cost and travel restraints that I don't know what that means. We didn't have another one to find out, but those were the two largest, and then COVID. And as everyone's pointed out, we don't know what we're going to look like in a month, 2 months, 3 months. So I think a more effective poll probably I'll send out to our members in a month or so. But yeah, it was interesting that it basically mirrored the polling today, except more undecided for sure.
And I think, that doesn't surprise me. There's so much up in the air, but I know we all hope. I constantly say I'm not that person who doesn't want. I mean, if anybody knows me, knows I'm a hugger. I will not be a hugger at the annual meeting, by the way. regardless of my vaccination status. But we're trying, and to Elizabeth's point, that in our one-on-one conversations about at some point when we start to open up, we're going to have to figure out how to do this. It's not going to be perfect. We will not have thought of everything. But to the greatest extent possible, we're doing everything to make sure that people are as safe as we can all be, including staff, right? Including our guests, as well as our board members and our bar members, and our judges. But we're also want to make sure that it's worth your effort and your concern, in showing up and participating in person. So to the extent possible, we're working on some fun stuff, some stuff that makes sense that we can do. And I hope to see most of you there. Again, stay tuned for further updates, and soon Michelle Garner will be sending out room reservation requests. So please plan accordingly. One of the last things I'll say, because it hasn't been asked this time, people always ask, why do we have to go out of state for meetings? The specific reasons are, and I didn't really appreciate this till I had to start planning these meetings 2 years ago. There are very few venues that offer the meeting space, the ability to host multiple meetings happening at the same time throughout multiple days, to host our annual meeting and provide enough rooms, including eating venues and fun stuff like a beach or something like that. There are very few venues in Georgia, and they are mainly in Atlanta and Savannah. And so besides those two venues, we try to pick something, and every president, it's their prerogative. So if you want to fuss about going to Wild Dunes, it's all on me. But I also picked a venue. I like to drive. I drive to my home and to my family in Virginia at least twice a year, used to. So I like to drive. I will be driving to Charleston, outside of Charleston, the Wild Dunes Resort. So I did pick a venue that I thought was drivable as well. That was something in mind. And it wasn't, they gave us a deal because they just built a hotel. We would not have been able to go to South Carolina if they had not built a hotel, brand spanking new as of, I think, January, that could house everything we needed to house and handle for our annual meeting. So having said that, if there are no other questions or comments, Damon or Sarah, turn it over to, I think Bert's, yep, Bert's next on a YLD report, Bert.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam President, officers, board members, Mr. Chief Justice, and distinguished guests. 77 years ago, I was sworn in as president of the Young Lawyers Division, and a lot has transpired during that time. Times were tough back then, but over the past year, young lawyers across the state have tightened their bootstraps, rolled up their sleeves, and hunkered down. We've accomplished a lot. So much so over the past year that I will not take up your time today, but if you wanted to look in the board book, we have several programs that we are proud about, that our leaders who have made this job really easy have stood up and found new and flexible ways of still serving our profession and our communities. I want to point out too that in the history of the Young Lawyers Division, there has never been a more fiscally responsible administration than mine. We have spent the least amount of money that any other administration has done, and that has not been that's no small order. We have very much put our eye on finances this year, but still been able to deliver some great programming and reached our members. In all seriousness, though, the Young Lawyers Division has had some new initiatives this year that came about during discussions about how can we serve our communities in a virtual world, what are the new needs of our communities in 2020 and 2021, and what are the needs of our profession and what can we do about it. The first one that I will tout, because I didn't get an opportunity to at the mid-year meeting, is the Young Lawyers Division poll worker program. We saw hundreds of volunteers, volunteer attorneys statewide volunteer to serve as poll workers, poll managers, and a new position known as a deputy registrar. That deputy registrar position was unique to Fulton County, and it came about with working with local election board and the secretaries of state the Secretary of State's office to have only attorneys serve in a unique role to monitor absentee ballots and those who wish to vote in person. Hundreds, again, as I stated, volunteered. And just so you all know, the American Bar Association's mid-year meeting, at least the Young Lawyers Division of the American Bar Association, at their mid-year meeting, they highlighted attorney efforts across the country to assist with elections. And that I want you all to know that we were the first association to start this type of program, but that it was mimicked by several other associations across the country. We also have a lot of members who have volunteered countless hours to serve those who have served us. Healthcare workers, educators, and first responders were put in a very compromised position over the past year to try and do their job in the face of a pandemic. And so the Young Lawyers Division has held several clinics to help with estate planning documents for those individuals. At one of these clinics during the month of November, we actually had 83 attorney volunteers who drafted countless documents for healthcare workers, educators, and first responders. And I was able to do that. Usually with these pro bono services, being in the insurance defense world, I am conflicted out, but I was able to draft some documents for some individuals, and it really was worthwhile. If anybody is interested, we are doing another wills clinic for these individuals in April through our Women in the Profession Committee. Additionally, a new director group known as the YLD Speakers Bureau was formed to try and address topical and pressing issues against our legal profession and our justice system, as well as our members in general. 8 YLD directors came together to share their experience in an event called Persevering the Pandemic, where our members and directors shared their experience of life over the past year. Obviously, we're all facing challenges. They're new and unique, and we're facing them under different circumstances. So it was important for us in a wellness activity to get together and kind of share what we faced and ways in which we've kind of overcome those challenges. It was a very cathartic experience, and we will have other events monthly as the year goes on. Our Young Lawyers Division Inclusion in the Profession Committee held the YLD held a implicit bias in the judicial proceedings, CLE, yesterday, which was greatly attended. It was important to me to have our YLD leaders attend some form of implicit bias training, and almost all of them were able to do so. The Inclusion in the Profession Committee then held breakout sessions following the CLE so that our members could be further engaged and discuss the subject matter that was presented by Dr. Ansley Booker from Mercer University's diversity chair position. This was also greatly attended, and our members really appreciated it. Actually, when our 30-minute breakout sessions were over, the folks wanted to continue on, but due to Zoom constraints, we had to move on to the YLD general session. The Inclusion Committee is also taking up the cause of finding mentors for their members. So if you are interested in serving as a mentor, please email inclusionlpa@gmail.com. They have done a great job to increase the active membership of that committee, as it has been a goal of the Young Lawyers Division in general to increase our diverse members that are active and to have a better understanding of the spaces we create as a division, and to make sure that we're including all of our membership. Our Leadership Academy had to cancel this year's class. We're moving it into the 2022 class, and we hope to graduate the 2020 Leadership Academy class. But our alumni committee has planned a really fun event this past week, where every class from 2006 on was represented by at least one member, and we competed in a trivia game by class for YLD swag. There's going to be future events like this held in conjunction with mid-year and annual meetings so that we can continue the institution of the Leadership Academy, where we've had so many successful graduates, number of which serve not only on this board, but on this executive committee. Now I want to get into a very important initiative, the 10th Annual Legal Food Frenzy. The actual competition kicks off April 19th through the 30th, but registration has already begun. If you have not registered your firm, or you just want to raise funds by yourself or your agency, please do so by going to galegalfoodfrenzy.org. Those who register before April 1st will get 100 extra bonus points in the competition. And this year, all donations are monetary through an online system. They're no longer accepting actual food donations, but know that $1 goes to the equivalent of 4 meals. And I want to take a moment and congratulate this supremely successful fundraiser of 2020. It really did, under tough times, turned out to be record-breaking. The leadership of Attorney General Chris Carr, this state bar, and Will Davis raised around $850,000, which is very, very impressive. And while it is impressive, I want to point out that that's not even $1 a child. We can do better, and we must do better this year to beat Will's numbers. I really cannot stress this enough. I find $850, while it doubled the goal for 2020, again, it's not even $1 a child. And so I will cue the Sarah McLachlan music with Stray Dogs if I need to, but I hope that you all take it upon yourselves to realize just how important this fundraiser is this year. Food banks across our state, you can do a quick Google search and you can verify that they are not doing well. They have been strained heavily by the economic woes that a lot of our communities have faced. And so we are basically starting from scratch at some of these food banks. And so the donations really are more important than ever. If you consider that $1 goes to 4 meals, that means that if you donate just $91, you can almost feed a child every day of the year. But that would leave one day that the child is not fed. So why don't you go ahead and consider pushing that up to $100 to ensure that each child can have a meal every day. This was further complicated, by the way, because a lot of schools were not held in person, they were virtual. So these students who rely on these meals at school to be subsidized were not able to get those. That also left a strain on the food banks and the education system to figure out what to do with these underprivileged areas of food dependency. So I really do look forward to working with the Attorney General's Office, the State Bar, and our committee. We have a lot of things that we hope we can usher in. Some of the planning we had depended upon our ability to meet in person, so we may have to scratch that, but we are working on some fun events that may be able to go forward virtually as a fundraising effort. And we really do want folks to know that and be reminded that this isn't an Atlanta competition. This is a state of Georgia competition, and all of the food banks are across this state, and they serve the communities where you donate. So if you are in Valdosta, you will donate to that food bank that's local to Valdosta, same as Savannah, Augusta, Blue Ridge, Gainesville, Columbus, and so on and so forth. Finally, the Young Lawyers Division continues to promote wellness at each of our general sessions and committee meetings. We have done a great job. Our litigation committee has sent out a weekly newsletter and recipe for Wellness Wednesdays. We have tried to incorporate some sort of mindful activity and physical activity at our sessions. We had a cooking session this past meeting, and we continue to promote all of the lawyer assistance programs, the wellness committee programs, the Use Your Six campaign at our meetings. I say this at our meetings, but it's worth repeating that, I had promoted the Use Your Six campaign for a couple of years. but I had not actually used it. So I took it upon myself this past year to actually call Core Care to set up an appointment. And I'll be transparent. You do feel a little vulnerable at first because they ask you a lot of questions about your mental health. How are you doing? Do you feel that you're drinking too much? Do you feel suicidal? Have you tried to hurt yourself? Really, they're asking those questions so that they can put you in contact with somebody who can address your needs in your community too. And you tell them who you would feel most comfortable talking to, what kind of counselor. And I found that to be the uniqueness. They were trying to mold it to what you need. It was nice. It was welcoming. And so I would encourage everybody to use your 6 and to promote lawyer wellness. Again, I thank the committee and the Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism for putting on this suicide awareness program next month, because it is very important. I also encourage everybody to read our WildD Review newsletter. The content has been expanded. We have a lot of diverse articles that have been written over the past year due to our new kind of partnership with voluntary bar associations across our state that have definitely expanded our content in a positive way. Again, this is a newsletter that has been time and time again been awarded the ABA's best new state newsletter for young lawyers division. So a lot of great contact. And finally, in closing, this year has been tough, but I want to extend my thanks and adulation to our president, Don Jones, for leading the bar during difficult times, and to the Chief Justice for leading our profession and our judiciary, because it hasn't been easy. There was no blueprint. There was no rule book on how to lead during these times, but we are a better profession for having both of you in charge over the past year. So thank you, everybody. And I look forward to seeing everyone at the annual meeting. Well, I will allow each of you to buy me a beer in celebration. So thank you all.
Ditto the last part of what Bert just said. Thank you, Bert. And thank you for your leadership. I really appreciate the opportunity I've had to watch each of the leaders of our bar on the executive committee contribute heavily as a team to our efforts this year. So thank you. Rick Ruffalo, Georgia Legal Services Program.
Bear with me while I work through some technical difficulties. There we go. Thanks, Dawn. As always, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about Georgia Legal Services and the great work that our advocates are doing throughout the state of Georgia. When given the opportunity, I always like to highlight initiatives that Georgia Legal Services takes on in collaboration with other organizations. I think that when we work together, we're a much stronger force. And I'd like to share with all of you an example, a very recent example. Earlier this week, of course, we had a terrible incident in which 8 Georgians were brutally murdered. And members of the Georgia Legal Services and Atlanta Legal Aid teams were talking about this tragic event, and they wanted their voices to be heard. And so, without prompting from either me or Steve Gottlieb, our teams got together and worked on a joint statement condemning hate-based violence in Georgia. And if you'll indulge me for a minute, I'd like to take this time to read the statement because I think it's important, for our voices to be heard. So here is the joint statement, and thanks to Amber for putting it up on the screen so that you can all read with me. The legal aid community of Georgia stands with our Asian American and Pacific Islander neighbors against the increasing violence against the Asian American and Pacific Islander community. Legal aid organizations work to protect victims of violence from all backgrounds, but to protect everyone, we must address the insidious and ever-present racism that flows through our society. Hate-based violence is intolerable in our nation and in the state of Georgia. 8 people died because of racist animus or racist beliefs that Asian people, especially Asian women, are sexual objects. We reject the racist ideas of white nationalism, misogynism, and other domestic terrorist groups. These ideals do not belong in a just America. Atlanta Legal Aid and Georgia Legal Services will continue to fight for racial equity alongside our Asian American and Pacific Islander partners. We hold our Asian American and Pacific Islander employees, clients, and community members in our hearts as we mourn the most recent loss of lives. We grieve with the families of the victims and offer them our hands and support. So I hope you agree with me. That's a very powerful statement. But I know you agree with me that words aren't enough, right? We have to take action. And I just want to make sure that you all know that every day, Georgia Legal Services and Atlanta Legal Aid are taking that action. Okay, we are representing women on a daily basis who are trying to escape from violent situations. And that's the action that we have to take. And so let me just share with you some numbers that supports our actions. So together, Georgia Legal Services and Atlanta Legal Aid last year provided services in over 3,300 protective order related cases, and an additional 3,200 related cases in the areas of child support, divorce, and obtaining public benefits. We protected over 6,000 women. We helped over 3,000 children. And 691 victims of domestic violence received custody of their children. We provided legal services in domestic violence related cases in every judicial circuit in the state of Georgia. Okay. So those are the actions that we're taking. Our voices still have to be heard, but we still have to take action. And it's no more less challenging this year than last year. Again, the pandemic has made the domestic violence crisis an even bigger crisis. And so we are ready to continue to represent women of domestic violence, victims of domestic violence. And, we're going to do that this year, knowing ahead of time that we're going to lose about $1 million in funding through the state appropriations process. $1 million. So when I talk about, the need for contributions, and you see that information in the board book, that's to make up for some funding gaps to do the work that I just described to you. So please keep that in mind when you're getting ready to fill out your bar dues notice and looking to check the box for Georgia Legal Services contributions. So I want to just update you on a couple other things real quickly, because again, the pandemic has made handling domestic violence matters even that more challenging, and we're seeing similar challenges in housing matters. We all know about the eviction tsunami that we face, with so many people facing eviction because they're unable to pay their rent due to loss of jobs, unable to collect unemployment benefits because of red tape. And so Georgia Legal Services is stepping up to the plate to handle those cases. the good news, and you may have seen coverage about this, with the COVID relief bill that was passed last December, and then again, the American Rescue Plan Act that just passed earlier this month, there is significant funding in both of those bills for rental assistance. And so where Georgia Legal Services has historically provided legal assistance to tenants facing dispossessory hearings, we are now going to be able to provide rental assistance. And so we're working today with the Department of Community Affairs to tap into those funds so that we can help tenants who are facing eviction by paying off back rent. So you're going to hear a lot more about this in the coming weeks, but I wanted to share it with all of you today, because again, it's another great example of helping people in need, particularly those impacted by COVID-related matters. Just a couple other things to finish up. Again, in the bar book, we have the state bar campaign. You'll see that this year, as we come to a conclusion in the next few days, that total contributions were $432,000. So just a great increase over last year. In fact, 18% increase over the previous year. So that's very promising. I'm very excited to see that type of increase. Yet I still remain disappointed that of the about 48,000 bar members who paid dues, that only 3,400 are contributing. So that's about a 7% participation rate. So I think we can do better. And I encourage all of you, as the new dues notices come out in the next coming weeks, that you please give consideration to Georgia Legal Services and the work that we're doing around the state. It's such important work, and your contributions are making a difference, as I described in some of the matters that we're handling. And then finally, again, if you'll look in your board book, you'll see my write-up from this week, in which we are celebrating our 50th anniversary at Georgia Legal Services, and I think it's appropriate that today's meeting is a joint meeting between the Board of Governors and the Young Lawyers Division, and that's appropriate because Georgia Legal Services was started by a group of lawyers who were members of the Young Lawyers section, as it was known back in the late 60s, early 70s. And after getting approval from the Board of Governors to pursue funding, the Young Lawyers section incorporated Georgia Legal Services program in 1971. So, a shout out to all young lawyers, both past and present, for the great work that you all do. And so to commemorate our 50 years, we're going to have a couple of signature events. Again, the details are in my write-up in the board book. But we are going to have a Rural Georgia Justice and Poverty Summit in September. We hope to have that summit in person at Georgia State University at the law school. But if not, if we're still not permitted based on COVID-related issues, then we'll have that virtually. And then we're going to have a signature gala in April of 2022, because I'm confident by April of next year, we will all be able to gather in person and properly celebrate 50 years of great work by our advocates in providing access to justice and opportunities out of poverty. So there'll be plenty of sponsorship opportunities, and I encourage all of you and your firms and your companies and your agencies to support us in our efforts. So with that, Dawn, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rick. And as we've talked about, trying to keep part of the reason why the Board of Governors agenda for each meeting this year includes specific updates from Georgia Legal Services to keep at top of mind the work that this important program does. And as a past president of Atlanta Legal Aid, I certainly appreciate, and current advisory board member, I certainly appreciate, Rick, the combined statement, the joint statement that Georgia Legal Services and Atlanta Legal Aid put out together. I also greatly appreciate that, as everybody else does, the great work that you all, the necessary work that you all do. To also keep it top of mind, we have changed our website this year, as you all may recall last fall, to ensure that you will be able to go on our website and donate to Georgia Legal Services beyond and apart from any donation you make when you pay your dues notice every year. And we specifically wanted to do that because as opportunities change, we wanted to make it as easy as possible for bar members and others to donate to Georgia Legal Services, as well as to donate to our optional legislative and public affairs fund. So I want to remind, and if we can put that link in the chat, I am not that savvy enough. I'd probably end up kicking myself out of this meeting if I tried on my computer to pull up the link. So I'm not going to try that. But Sarah, if there's a way that we can include in the chat, or Rick, if you have a handy link to include for donations, I would greatly appreciate us sharing that. You don't have to wait to your dues notice, although you can. That's coming up. You don't have to wait to donate. So thank you again for that important work and for the reminder of why it's needed today, as much as it's ever been before. And congratulations on your 50th anniversary. The State Bar looks forward to celebrating with you. Next is Anita Wallace-Thomas, the chair of Seeking Equal Justice and Addressing Racism and Racial Bias Committee. Anita, and that committee is co-chaired or vice-chaired by Gary Spencer, our own Board of Governors member.
She should be rejoining as a panelist.
Thanks, Amber. And let me just take a moment while she's pulling her up. Amber's working, but I just need to say it didn't dawn on me until about 3:30 after our meeting, mid-year meeting, that the staff who had no reason to believe that we were going to have a Zoom meeting for 6.5 hours, they were just awesome. And I should have recognized that during my president's report, and I failed to do so, so I'm doing so now. But Sarah and Amber especially, thank you for the work you're doing behind the scenes to make all of this work for us, to make sure that we're doing the work of the bar, because without you, we wouldn't be able to do it. So thank you.
I don't see that Anita has rejoined.
Gary, I'm going to text her. Gary, do you mind giving a brief? And if not, I'm happy to do so.
I'll promote him to panelist.
Anita's calling me right now.
Okay. So if she's having trouble logging on, we can go to the suicide awareness and come back. That's no problem. So let's do this. I'm not sure if Gary's getting an update. Okay. Yes, sir. You're muted.
she's trying to get back on. So I told
Okay.
her to re-click and she should be in good shape.
Okay. Amber, if you don't see her in a couple seconds, we'll skip her. If you guys, I hear no objection, we'll skip her and take the suicide awareness program with Judge Morris and then come back to Anita.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Shandina Morris, and I have been a member of the Georgia Bar since 1997 and member of the Board of Governors since 2013. Several years ago, I lost my father to suicide, and it was devastating for me. It is because of the State Bar that helped me get through it. I will tell you that we have lost a number of our bar family members to suicide. We have lost judges, partners of law firms, associates, prosecutors, defense attorneys, and clients. I know that many of you know even more people. We recently lost one of our members of the Columbus Bar, a prosecutor, Michael Eugene Craig. So I am here today to tell you that suicide is a major public health concern. Over 48,000 people have died by suicide in 1 year in the United States. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death overall. So Chief Justice Melton has taken a very courageous step and is hosting on Friday, April 30th, 2021, from 2 to 5 p.m., a 3-hour CLE with 1 hour of professionalism specifically to the topic of suicide awareness. This will be the most important CLE that we have had. We will have members of the bar that will be speaking, to include our moderator, Sally Quillian Yates. We will have experts all across the state of Georgia and health experts that will speak on topics ranging from suicide, suicide prevention, including warning signs of suicide, suicide prevention methods, and how to find mental health help and support. Today, I am here standing before you in this virtual setting because I am asking for a call of action. Several months ago, I came before you and I told you all about our Out of Darkness, our suicide walk, and you all took that challenge and actually donated over $4,334, which is the most that we have ever had from the State Bar of Georgia to help prevent suicide. So today, the call of action that I am asking is that each member of our Board of Governors, each of you, go ahead and register for this suicide prevention program, CLE. And then once you register, I want you to send an email as a Board of Governors member to all of your constituents. And we have a sample form, a sample email for you, and have a link. And then I want you to encourage other members of the bar that aren't in your circuit to attend this CLE. This is extremely important. It is extremely crucial. And I'm asking you to hold true to this call of action. I will conclude with just a couple of quotes. To anyone who is hurting out there, it is not a sign of weakness to ask for help. It is a sign of strength. We hope that everyone that is struggling knows that they are not alone, and this world is a better place with you in it. Thank you.
Judge Morris, thank you for sharing your personal insight and for providing that important information. I am confident that every member of the Board of Governors and the Executive Committee, the past presidents who are in attendance today, and our special guests understand and appreciate the work that your committee is doing and will in fact register as soon as possible. I certainly expect the Board of Governors and our Executive Committee to rise to the challenge that you put forth. I won't call any other names, but I remember one past president who committed suicide several years ago. Someone I had a chance to work with when I was president of Gabois in 2005. And I appreciate that we continue to have this conversation and put it up front for everyone. Thank you. Do we have Anita back?
She has not rejoined.
Okay. Gary, are you? Okay, Gary says I'm ready.
Okay.
So
I'll promote him.
Yep, our vice chair of the Seeking Equal Justice and Addressing Racism and Racial Bias Committee, Gary Spencer, will provide the report. Thank you.
And listen, I've been told that I need a ring light, but I'm not going to get one, so we'll just figure that out. So our committee has been rather busy. I think in February we had a conversation about Blue and Black Lives Matter that had about 100 people on the Zoom call to have that discussion. In April, our next courageous conversation will be White Fragility. Many of you are familiar with that book. At the annual meeting, there will be a seminar on institutional bias in the civil and criminal arena, and we want to give special thanks to Terica Ganzi at Southern Center for Human Rights, Francis Johnson, who I believe is on this call, and James Yancey for the work they're doing to put that together. And most recently, as of yesterday, we assisted in developing a statement in support of our Asian brothers and sisters who have been subject to this racist violence. So that's our report, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Spencer. And I actually want to read, you all should have received a copy of this statement that I signed and put out yesterday around close of business. But frankly, I think it's worth reading in light of the entire conversation and kind of sub-theme that we've been having today from our opening through Rick's comments. I want to be clear that the Seeking Justice Committee is the reason that we have this statement formulated. It was obviously, it went through the proper process, but they were the motivation for putting this out. And I'm proud of the efforts that that committee in particular did in having these uncomfortable and difficult conversations appropriately and helping the bar to focus in the right direction. Friends and colleagues, we condemn all attacks and acts of discrimination against Asian American community members, including this week's horrific murders in Atlanta, where our state bar's operations are based. The recent spate of anti-Asian violence in the United States, preceded by centuries of legally sanctioned discrimination and xenophobia, underscore the need for this country to recognize the diversity and contributions of all communities of color to the fabric of America. We must acknowledge that even in a free society, words have power and consequences. While we stand for the right to engage in vigorous debate, that debate must be responsible and devoid of hate speech. The State Bar of Georgia Seeking Equal Justice and Addressing Racism and Racial Bias Committee is deeply concerned about these and similar attacks against Asian Americans that have been happening with greater frequency during the COVID-19 pandemic. The committee will continue their work to engage, listen, and learn from all who are willing to share their experiences with bigotry and racism, identify, address, and eradicate bigotry, racism, and racial bias in the administration of justice in this state, encourage, partner with, and assist local bar associations and other law-related organizations, entities, and agencies to accomplish these goals statewide, and otherwise ensure an equal system of justice for all. To our Asian American sisters and brothers of the bar, know that we see you and we stand in solidarity with you. And it was signed by me, but the impetus was brought about by the Seeking Equal Justice Committee and their request for the bar to make some statement. I continue to encourage our membership to tell us what they're thinking. Very few folks, I can't imagine, most of you are very vocal about your concerns and what's going on. As a bar, we want to make sure that we're supporting each other mentally, physically, psychologically, And certainly as we all are working together for these social justice issues, to make sure that we support each other in those efforts as well. When we talk about social justice, it's not a black and white issue. I've had to say that multiple times out loud over the course of this year, but it's not. It's an everybody issue. And we are literally all in this together. So I'm sure I will continue to hear the concerns and criticism from folks who don't necessarily agree that we should be having these discussions. But I am grateful that we can agree that there are ways in which we can work together to support each other. And this is one of them. So I applaud the committee for its efforts and again, appreciate all the volunteer work that's gone to each committee and each section of this bar to make us a better profession and to make us better lawyers. So thank you. Next I have, because I put everything all the way down when I read that whole statement. Next on the agenda is our Attorney Wellness Committee. And that's our chair, Arjuan Hicks.
Good afternoon. Oh no. So I had my chat ready to publish, and when you promoted me, it disappeared, and I had worked really hard on it. Anyway, it was the newsletter, so I was trying to put it in the chat. But I just wanted to say good morning still to everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. From the Attorney Wellness Committee, we want to thank you, Madam President, the Executive Committee, all of the support that we get from the Board of Governors, the Chief Justice and the Chief Justice's Commission on professionalism in our wellness work. This month, we have launched our first quarterly newsletter. You all should have gotten that newsletter in an email. It will be an opt-in email. Yes, and as soon as I finish, I'm gonna try to figure out how to put it back in the chat so that you can link to it as well. It will be quarterly. It's also in your bar book, pages 57 to 61. We put it in your bar book so that you could share that information with your constituents and tell them they can opt in as well, remind them that they got the email. And I just want to highlight some of the information that you will receive by getting our newsletter and letting you know what it is we're doing in our commitment to wellness on behalf of our bar members. We will have a spotlight section, and this month we're spotlighting our social well-being subcommittee, and that subcommittee is focused right now. We're doing monthly touches, and we say monthly touches. That is a term that was given to us by our Madam President as a way to reach out to our constituents every month to be able to have something for them to connect with. We had one of the ones that we had recently was we talked about using your six. So we had a session on what does that look like, how to use your six. And so all of our monthly touches are recorded, and you can go on the website and watch and view the monthly touch if you're not able to participate. And so to demystify the process, I would suggest anybody when using your six or talking about using your six to be able to refer to the website and go and look at those videos that when we talked about it. We also had one in February on vision boards. This is mine. And I'm excited. I had tried to do a vision board for years. I found my old one. I thought I had actually done it, and I actually cut out the magazine pieces and never put it on the board. So I feel so accomplished as a matter of our monthly touch for February. Our monthly touch for March will be next week. It is on Wednesday, the 24th at noon. And that one is how to say no, how to say no. The last minute requests that people pull on you as an attorney, their emergency doesn't have to be your emergency. And being able to find ways to feel good and not stressed about having to say no, if that is in fact, it's your choice. Whether you choose yes or no, remember that it's your choice. And remember that no is a complete sentence. So that will be our monthly touch for Wednesday. But the newsletter also tells you about upcoming events. Will reprint. I'll have links to articles because we have our members who are publishing articles in the Bar Journal. They're also becoming or already national speakers and have information that they provide and give us links to, and we will provide that in the newsletter. This information is also on our website. We partner with the Lawyers Assistance Program, and we have podcasts available. Our president has done one, our past president, Daryl, has done one. I'm scheduled to record one next week, and we are very excited to be in partnership with Lynn Garson and the Lawyers Assistance Program. We're also partnering with the Suicide Prevention Program and the Chief Justice Commission on Professionalism in the April 30th Suicide Awareness presentation. So we are partnering with people. We have social media. Amber is just phenomenal in keeping our social media up and running. She posts all the information that I'm sharing with you. She posts on the State Bar website on behalf of the Lawyers Living Well Committee. I have on my shirt today, and hopefully we'll be able to provide other shirts and things in the future. We want to continue to promote Use Your Six, hashtag Use Your Six. And when you're talking to bar members, just remember, because you never know what people are going through. And I want to tell people, you don't have to be going through anything. If you need a safe space to communicate, just because you just want to talk and need a safe space. Remember that everybody has mental health because we all have physical health. We take care of both because that makes us an entire package. So I just wanted to highlight those things. I thank you for the opportunity to present this information. If you have any questions, you can email me or go to our website and look at the information we have. Opt into our newsletter. It will be quarterly. Opt in to receive the future issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you and your committee for all the work you guys have done this year. I can't imagine the effort to put on a monthly program, but I'm so proud of it. And as I noted it during my president's report, the National Conference of Bar Presidents has given us particular shout outs for the work that you all have done. So thank you for that. And note that there's information in the chat that Sarah just put up for folks to opt into the newsletter.
Thank you.
And before we get to the legislative update by Christine, Tony Del Campo, our secretary, is going to come back and give us a brief reminder related to the roll call and the attendance roster. Tony?
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to remind everybody that may not have been here when I gave my first announcement with regard to roll call, that you are being registered as being present if your email or your name is listed on the attendees list. If you have joined us by phone, we do not necessarily know who you are. So you need to please just let us know that you participated by phone so that we can mark you correctly on future board books. Additionally, if you would take a minute to look at the board book and see if your presence has been recorded accurately. We want to make sure we have an accurate count. Just let me or Sarah Cool know, and we will mark you appropriately if you find that there's an error in the recording of attendance. So having said that, Madam President, that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Del Campo. Next, we have and before I forget, I'm going to nominate our president-elect to do one of those wellness videos as well, FYI. Just think that makes sense to me. So Javon, please note that. Next, we have Christine Butcher-Hayes, our Legislative Affairs Director, who's going to give us our 2021 legislative update.
Before we do have a raised hand from Lawton Stevens.
Yes.
So I'm going to go ahead and promote him.
Thank you. You guys got to jump in. Clearly, I'm not paying attention to the Q&A. Sorry.
Lawton, you can speak if you unmute yourself.
I'm sorry, that was a mistake, but I did want Tony to know I'm here, so Sorry about that.
Fair enough. Please continue to let me know, because obviously I'm not paying attention. You would think I'd have this down by now, but there are a lot of moving balls, folks. Okay, so Christine.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to update you on the bar's legislative activities down at the Capitol this year. There were 5 legislative days left in the 2021 legislative session. Sine Die, which is the final day of the legislative session, day 40, is scheduled for March 31st, so that's 10 days from now. And so it's going to be a very busy 10 days down at the Capitol as, different stakeholders, lobbyists, different legislators try to get their bills across the finish line. And it's always a crazy time in that last couple of weeks. In terms of the 3 bills that the bar has in its legislative package this year, the Uniform Mediation Act, which is Senate Bill 234, sponsored by Board of Governors member Senator John Kennedy, passed in the Senate and was voted favorably out of the House Judiciary Committee this week. And we are optimistic that that bill will receive a vote on the House floor, and we are hoping that that happens in the next 10 days. The remote online notary legislation, which is House Bill 334, passed in the House before the crossover day deadline, where all bills have to pass in one chamber in order to continue through the legislative process this session. And so it made that deadline, and it is awaiting a hearing in the Senate, and we are hoping that that happens this week. The Advanced Psychiatric Directive Bill, which is a priority of the fiduciary section, and they were actively involved in drafting alongside a number of other medical stakeholders. That bill did not get filed this year, and that was related to some issues with bill sponsor and some of the other stakeholders that were involved in the bill. But we are hoping that the bill gets filed by the end of session, and because it's a 2-year legislative session, it will live into the next session and we can get things started on it at the beginning of next year. I also want to briefly mention some of the Judicial Council's pandemic-related legislation, which I know is very important as jury trials begin to ramp back up in the state. Senate Bill 163, which would allow the suspension of the statutory speedy trial requirement. That bill passed in the House and the Senate. There were changes that were made in the Senate, in the House, and therefore it's going to have to receive one more vote in order to finally pass and make it to the governor's desk. And also House Bill 635, which allows judges to perform judicial acts regardless of their location. There were questions about whether if a judge was outside of the county, but performing hearings or performing judicial acts, like signing orders via Zoom, whether or not those acts were valid. This bill addresses that issue, and it also allows court and criminal trials to be conducted at alternative facilities. This is so, especially in the more highly populated counties, they can find alternative locations to spread people out for jury trials. And that awaits a vote in the Senate. We're also keeping an eye on the budget this year. There's been a 5.2% increase in the overall state budget over last year's fiscal budget. And that's $27.2 billion. Like Rick Ruffalo had mentioned in his report from Georgia Legal Services, the state funds for the domestic violence grant in particular are down significantly. They were cut last year during the pandemic, and they've only restored $175,000 of what was cut this year in the House. We're waiting to see what the Senate comes out with, but like I said, that funding was cut, I believe, nearly in half last year, and so it will not be fully restored to the $2.5 million it was at previously. And so that's certainly an area that I know both of the legal services organizations in the state that work on the domestic violence work are certainly needing financial support on, because the state won't be including additional money beyond the $175,000 this year. Sections continue to be very active in the legislative process. We receive requests continuously from different legislators who want section input on their bills and are looking for the expertise of people that practice in highly specialized areas, particularly the fiduciary section, the real property section, and the family law section. I've also received requests for expertise from the franchise section this year as well. And so the sections continue to be active and work on a lot of these bills as they go through the legislature. And we appreciate the engagement from the legislators and stakeholders in bringing in the bar to contribute on those bills. And finally, I wanted to thank Dawn for her leadership as issues come up during the legislative session. It's very rapid pace. It's politics and the way that things just evolve over the legislature are sometimes nonsensical. And I really have appreciated her willingness to listen and her flexibility this year as we work on some of those issues that affect the bar. And I also wanted to thank our contract lobbyists, Rusty Sewell, Mark Middleton, and Roy Robinson, who are down there every day and fighting and working on our legislative package. So if there are any questions on individual legislation, I'm happy to take those. And fingers crossed, we have a smooth final 10 days of the session.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you for your leadership. When you work on the executive committee, you really get an up close and personal view of exactly what at least the senior staff like Christine are working on every day. And I greatly appreciate it, especially in light of the challenges we've had this year in particular. And with the new baby, maybe not so new now, but being a mom, I can only imagine how full your plate is. So thank you for your leadership in that regard. Are there any questions? I'm remembering to slow down a bit. Are there any questions for Christine related to any legislative affairs issues?
No raised hands.
Okay. And as a reminder, you can go on our website at any time and provide optional donations, again, for Georgia Legal Services and for our legislative funds. Now, you guys remember we're going to do a special recognition for Jeff Davis, our immediate past executive director. He's not able to make it. He's on baby watch, as I understand today, but there was a recording that was created in case he wasn't able to make this meeting in person virtually, since we initially, our plan was to present to him a resolution at the mid-year meeting. So I think, tell me if I'm wrong, Sarah, I think I'm going to read the resolution first, and then we're going to play his video. Is that right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So the resolution, I had it in hand January. Sarah took it back, as she should have, before I get started with it. And she's made sure that Jeff has it in hand now. So he does have the resolution, which reads as follows. State Bar of Georgia resolution recognizing Jeffrey R. Jeff Davis for devoted service to the legal profession, the public, and the system of justice. Whereas Jeffrey R. Jeff Davis has served the legal profession, the public, and the justice system admirably for his more than 6 years as executive director of the State Bar of Georgia, and whereas Jeffrey R. Jeff Davis graduated from the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, and the Candler School of Theology at Emory University and earned his law degree from Georgia State University College of Law and was admitted to the State Bar of Georgia in 1991, and whereas Jeffrey R. Jeff Davis was joined the staff of the State Bar of Georgia in 1992 as Assistant General Counsel, leaving in 94 to become Real Estate Counsel for the Caribou Coffee Company, and whereas Jeffrey R. Jeff Davis returned to the State Bar of Georgia staff in 1995 and served through 1997 as Assistant Bar Counsel, developing a strong background in professional discipline and the bar's corporate side, including contracts and employment issues, and whereas Jeffrey R. Jeff Davis joined the Chapper firm in Atlanta and Conyers in 1998, where he practiced for 2 years before becoming a partner with Winkler, DuBose, and Davis, LLC in Madison, where he remained for the next 10 years, and whereas Jeffrey R. Jeff Davis served as director of the Judicial Qualifications Commission from 2010 to 2014, when he rejoined the State Bar of Georgia as executive director, succeeding the late Cliff Brasher, and whereas during the service of Jeffrey R. Jeff Davis as executive director, the State Bar of Georgia has seen continued growth to more than 52,000 members, and under his strong and steady hand of leadership, has successfully fulfilled its responsibility to serve the public and the justice system. And Whereas Jeffrey R. Jeff Davis has been a dedicated and loyal partner in leadership during at least part of the terms of the past 8 presidents of the State Bar of Georgia. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the State Bar of Georgia does formally recognize and express its appreciation to Jeffrey R. Jeff Davis for his dedication and many contributions during his years of distinguished service as executive director, which will have a lasting positive impact on the legal profession, the justice system, and the people of the state of Georgia. And this resolution is dated January 9th, 2021, and signed by me as president. So now we're going to play some remarks from Jeff.
Hello, Board of Governors members. Just left court, have my State Bar mask on. It's good to be back in the trenches. Look forward to seeing some of you out in the courtrooms now that things are getting opened up. I'm sorry I can't be with you today. My son and his wife are expecting my first grandchild, and I'm on watch for that. So I'm sure most of you understand what that's like. But I want to thank you for this special recognition. And I remember back when I took this position took the reins from my good friend, Cliff Brazier, who served as your executive director for so many years. And my first president, who I had the pleasure of working with, was Patrice Perkins Hooker. And she was kind enough to give me great advice. And she said, Jeff, you're leaving the JQC. You have 1 employee, you're about to have 125. You manage a budget of $500,000. You're about to manage a budget of $20 million. And you're going to have a board of governors of 160 people to deal with. She goes, it's going to be like going from managing a Greenpeace raft to a cruise ship. And there are a lot of good things about both of those, but I have enjoyed leading this bar with all of you. The greatest thing that we have is the volunteers, the folks who do this out of their love simply for the bar in service to our profession. And we couldn't do it without you. So in essence, Patrice was right. We are kind of like a cruise ship. We embark every year and we get some more passengers and we bring them on, new board members, and we have a good time. And perhaps it's a little bit like the Love Boat in the sense that we all get together, we have an interesting time together. Sometimes we have disputes, sometimes we argue, but we always end with a great party and we get together and we enjoy one another's company. So I look forward to really getting back with you when things open up. Thank you for this award. I couldn't do it without all of you who help us run this big cruise ship. And I can't even begin to thank the staff that really does all the work. And the staff of 125 that I've had the pleasure of working with make this job look really easy. So I accept this award because of all of them and their hard work and the support that they gave me as executive director of the bar. It has been my honor and my privilege to serve you the last 6 years. Thank you so much for this award.
Thank you, and thank you, Sarah, for making that happen with pretty short notice. So with that said, the remainder of our agenda, and let me just close out Jeff's recognition with, we are sorry that we haven't gotten together. I continue to encourage those who know him, specifically because he wasn't able to participate today, that you all continue to reach out, give him your congratulations, and thanks, and give him your thanks for the work that he's done with this bar as executive director. I refer you to the written reports as they're listed in your board book, including the executive committee minutes, which are always posted online, along with our board of governors minutes are always posted online and available for anyone. The law practice management report, the media report, the Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism report, and the Georgia Diversity Program report. I also wanted to specifically mention that we are looking for, Damon, what's the title for the Georgia Diversity Program opening?
Director of the Georgia Diversity Program.
Thank you. You want to talk about the position and where folks can find information about it?
Sure. Yeah. So recently, Rebecca Christian Smith, who was the director of the Georgia Diversity Program, accepted a position with Kilpatrick Townsend. I think that's the name of the firm. I remember the old name as their director of diversity inclusion, and I think there's a equality or equity title associated with that as well. And so as a result, we worked on revamping the job description. We've heard from the advisory board with the Georgia Diversity Program where there is room for improvement into the role as it supports the bar and its members. And so we've included those, and we've opened that up for interested candidates. It is on our website, and Sarah has been reading my mind and has posted the position there where it can be found. We encourage all of you and people that you may know that would be qualified for this position to encourage them to go there and check it out. And we are looking forward to moving forward with closing that search up here soon.
Thank you, Damon. Is there any old business that we need to take up? I'll go through this slowly. Please post in Q&A or raise your virtual hand. Damon or Sarah, stop me. If you see anything, is there any new business that we need to take up? Any announcements? Oh, sorry, no, go ahead, David.
I was just saying no indication, sorry.
Okay. Are there any announcements that anybody wants to share with the group? All right, I will take a point of personal privilege. This is, I have one more board meeting in June. But as you may recall, that Friday meeting before Saturday, handing things over to Elizabeth, is mainly reports and awards. And I will not give specific comments right now, but I do want to take this moment to say it has been my absolute pleasure to work with all of you. And I constantly remind myself that we're all volunteers, we're elected, but we're all volunteers. And as we head into the last quarter of this bar year, I ask for your continued active engagement and participation. Hopefully there are takeaways that we presented to you by way of information, reports, and specific to-dos and offers of encouragement and attendance to-dos that we are asking you to take back to your constituents, to share with others, to post on social media, to get the word out about the work of the bar. We are all in this together. You guys have a great day. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All those in favor, raise your virtual or actual hand. I'm calling it done. Thank you all. We are hereby adjourned. I look forward to seeing you all, hopefully most of you in person in Wild Dunes Resort. Thank you.
Done.